The Late Night L.O.A.D. Welcome to the Late Night L.O.A.D. Late Night L.O.A.D.
Hey everybody, Web C here, and it is another episode of the Late Night L.O.A.D. And tonight we have Leprechaun in the house. He's my co-host, and then we also have our wonderful Model Rocketeer hanging out in the background. He'll be talking some crap from here on out. We'll see what he says and how far he makes it, but he's doing good so far. We're glad to see him on the other side of the tunnel. Surgeries, no matter how heavy or light they can be, they're always worrisome. So we're glad to see you on the other side of the tunnel there, brother. And we are rolling into another night of the Late Night L.O.A.D. And this episode is Nordic, Tall Whites. Have they integrated? Are they phase dimension 4 and above? Did they help humanity usher in a new technology? Okay, so that is the topic for tonight. We'll be watching a video and talking about it throughout the night, and maybe we'll break that video up into bigger pause sections and stuff throughout the night. But I'm gonna go get the kids in bed, and I'm gonna let Leprechaun and the Model Rocketeer kind of carry the conversation for a minute. I'll be right back, guys.
All right, Chief. What's up, Leprechaun?
What's up? Yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah.
This is gonna be a fun one.
Yeah, I know. I'm excited. Hey, happy Friday to everybody out there listening, tuning in from the depths of the universe. Glad to have you here.
Absolutely.
Glad to be here.
Sit back, relax, and kick your feet up.
Yeah, man. Open your mind, open your heart. Kind of
That's
ideas like this is important. I know it goes against a lot of our beliefs. So here's what I want to start my night with and drop on you guys. Are you the believer? Or are you the beliefs? Now think of that question really carefully. Who are you really? See, when you have beliefs, let's use a really hot button, maybe like racism. Okay, it's a really stiff and very ugly and rough belief, right? Because we don't know where it comes from. Some people just don't like other people, and it usually comes from this weird belief, right? Like, oh, because there's somebody's different. Right? Because racism covers the board of everybody that's different when you start holding some sort of belief against them. But if you're the believer, kind of like in the idea of the source creator or God for some people, you believe. You just simply believe that they are you. You are them. You believe that there's limitless power in the idea of not holding somebody to a judgment.
I like that a lot.
So this is where this guy ties in. I know this is crazy information. It's a little hard to handle for some because of our beliefs. We believe, and where those come from are, from our past. Our parents, their parents taught them, and our parents taught us the best that they could. And everybody else we've ever interacted with, they've done the best they could to teach us what they know. And we have, been tasked with following that trail of information. It's so guided. Like us, we kind of decided that the world was a lot bigger than most people might imagine. So here we are talking about strange things that scare people, and that fear is what keeps us from chasing more information.
Yeah, and I think that fear is, I feel like that fear is, put there for a reason. I mean, it doesn't take much research or much looking into to know that there's some serious lies and holes in the stories we've been told about our past. So, whether we, during this show or in conversation stumble upon the right or the wrong one, I simply enjoy, the idea of throwing those theories out there and bouncing them around, no matter how erratic or, simple, the logic behind it is. It's, there's more out there than what we have been told. And I know that. I believe that 100%. And I like playing around with the little crumb trails that we're given that we can try and, make some hypotheses off of.
Absolutely, I agree with that, man, for sure. A little bit of curiosity goes a long way, and
Yep.
it's important because that little bit of work that we do for chasing that answer, it helps others. And here we are. We've gotten brave enough in ourselves to now reach out and try to spread that truth a little
Yeah.
bit, our truth, to open the mind and show others. You're not alone. We're all thinking the same thing, and we're tired. We're tired of the narratives. We're kind of tired of the bull crap because we know life can be much better.
Yep. I mean, I grew up, a Methodist Christian, so I mean, it was much more laid back community. Like I didn't have to go to church as a kid in, a suit and a tie or anything like that. It was very casual, they'd have, much more laid back music during the service and stuff. And I mean, even then, things didn't always add up with some of the teachings. I mean, I'm not against religion or, the Bible or anything. I mean, I still think that, in the right community, a church can be a good place for kids to just learn basic rights and wrongs and see, communities come together. I think that that's, is valuable. But, I just think,
Oh,
like,
absolutely.
eyes open, not closed.
Right, right. It's a great stepping stone. It's a safe place. A house of worship. We come together in fellowship in places like that.
Yep.
But there's a little bit of a disconnect, I think,
Mhm.
around all of us, because our minds are really closed, and this is where the beliefs come in, where we're really pushing. Somebody has pushed a lot of beliefs, like an agenda maybe, onto us, and have made us fearful. If you do this here, you're going to be punished beyond measure. That's really quite not quite truthful, other than the fact that karma is real and you will pay for what you do. But that's why there we have all these things
And
to help guide us.
I think that's one of the things that bugged me a lot about, you know the Christian community and a lot of I mean a lot of those people that believe so hard that I've met, obviously not all of them. I mean I shouldn't even say a lot, but I've seen my fair share of them where they're also the same people that are quick to deem you to hell, like, oh, you're going to, it's like, I mean, like,
Right,
first off,
right.
if you do believe, in the preachings of the Bible, it says right there very clearly that you're not deemed to judgment. That's you're crazy. It says it is his job to judge, the other. But I've seen so many people of, some of those communities that are just so quick to, and it's, I mean, from what I got from, you know, paying attention, in Sunday school and stuff, it's, if you see somebody that you don't think is worthy, your job is supposed to reach out to them and try and bring them up and lift them to a better place than where they are.
Right,
I mean,
right. There you
I mean,
go.
if there's any better explanation that I can give, I mean, it's it's Mary. You know what I mean? Uh,
Yep,
that's the best example I can give you when it comes to that. So I mean, and I think that part of the message is really important. I mean, I don't need to believe in any religion to want to have the ability to lift somebody else from a better place. That's
yep,
that's that's the first person you should be reaching to help somebody out. Whether you're elevating them spiritually to just find themselves and find faith in themselves, or
yes,
just to open their mind up because their mind seems like it's closed into a cage, and you just want to unleash the beast and say, "Go wild!" Like I
yeah,
mean,
man.
creativity is one of the most powerful ways of opening yourself up, expressing yourself. Even one of my kids, this girl is doing amazing in class. She's smart as all hell, beautiful, amazing artist, creative mind, but she lacks confidence in herself. So as a father, that's one of my biggest things I've been trying to work on with her in the last couple of years. Like, you don't have to be that shy kid and be afraid of what other people believe. You're amazing. That's all that
Yep,
matters. You
yep.
know.
Cultivate that self confidence. Hey, I want to
Yep.
touch on something you said that was super powerful. Like you said, people believe so hard in their amazing, beautiful religion. Let's say, Catholicism, like you mentioned, it's a beautiful religion, but they believe so hard that they're not willing to look at somebody else's point of view.
Yep.
It's
Yep.
and it's beautiful because they believe so.
Yep. We lost you there. Oh no. No. All right.
They've been taught to believe so hard. And and like you said, man, we just gotta just open the doors and let the open mind. You said creativity, imagination is a doorway to the subconscious, and it's limitless. And you need to believe in that. Absolutely, you are.
Oh, we're losing you just a little bit here and there. You're really crispy, and then we're losing you a little.
What do you want to do?
Yeah. Yep. No, I mean it's and that's one of the cool things. I mean, like just to touch base with with my church's community. As I got older, one of the coolest things that really kind of let me know about the community I grew up in is they all kind of voted and came to the agreement that you didn't have to just follow their own religion to find that space up there. They were strong believers that you could go make it through any religion as long as you were just a genuine good person. And I thought that was really cool because that was the older community making that kind of vote and decision.
Yep, I like
But
it. I will agree with that.
we got Mr. Webb C back here.
Hey, everybody, look at me. All right, let's get into the first segment of what this guy is going to talk about. He is going to talk about his encounters with the tall whites. And we're going to see. And then we're going to go talk about some other people's encounters and everything of the tall whites as well. I'm getting notifications all over the place. That is weird. All right. So,
roll
here we
beautiful
are.
bean.
And we will, hit play.
3 months remaining on my term of enlistment. So the Air Force policy was that I was given enough.
So, this video is brought to us by Absolute Documentaries.
I want tobacco, sugar.
So, let's get that little commercial in because this is how they get their advertising done too. So,
absolutely, we appreciate it. This is what it takes. We got to work together. Spread the news on Toast nationwide.
Charles James Hall. Alien contact with the tall white ETs at Nels AFB. So there's a book series we can read. We can have our own little Oprah's book club.
All right, I got a quick question. Maybe you guys will know.
Millennial Hospitality Series.
Shoot.
Go for it.
I got 5 milligram tablets. How many should I take?
What does the bottle say?
Yeah, I was gonna say, hold on. Duh, look at the fuck. I walked away. It was too far. I was like, I don't want to go back. Take 1 tablet every 4 hours. Okay.
Yep.
Okay, got it.
Thanks, guys. That's what I would take. That's what I would do.
I follow the recommended dosage.
Yeah, well, thanks, guys. I needed that because I was too far away. And I was like, I'm just gonna do this. All right, on with the show.
When I was in the Air Force in the middle 1960s. I was born in Wisconsin.
That hurts so bad.
And on July 24th, 1964, I entered the U.S. Air Force. I was stationed at Lackland, where I did basic training, and then at Chanute Air Force Base, Illinois, for weather training school. And in March of 1965, I was sent to Nellis Air Force Base, which is just outside Las Vegas, Nevada. And I was there until the 7th of May, 1967, when I shipped out to Vietnam. I returned from Vietnam in May of 1968. I had less than 3 months remaining on my term of enlistment, so the Air Force policy was that I was given an honorable discharge at home. While I was at Nellis Air Force Base from 65 until 67, I spent more than 2 of those years out on the Nellis gunnery ranges as the range weather observer. I discovered that out on those bases, out on the ranges, there is a base that the Air Force maintains for aliens. And the Air Force maintains the outer perimeter. There is an inner perimeter which the aliens maintain, and then everything inside the inner perimeter is treated like an alien embassy. Looking up the valley to the north, the the base is in the mountains at the far end of the valley. It's probably 40 miles or so up there. There's two mountains up there. The base itself is in the mountain on the east. The alien living area, the living quarters, are under.
Players have been asking us for ways to target
Stupid
specific
commercials.
cards they really want for their deck. Our solution to this is the
area, the living quarters, are underground in the mountains on the west. After I got out of the service in May of '68, I met my wife and married her in May of '69. My wife Marie, and we went to college. We went to school in California. I have a master's degree in nuclear physics, a bachelor's degree in thermal physics, and over the years I also received a master's in business administration from Nova Southeastern University at Fort Lauderdale. During the 80s, when computers finally were good enough so that there were word processors, then I began writing my memoirs for my children and grandchildren. And those memoirs became the Millennial Hospitality series. Found that I wanted to convey to people, especially my children and my grandchildren, how it felt to be the weather observer and to have the aliens come down to where I was and to have to interact with them. Originally, I was part of the rotation pattern. So originally, I was sent up in May of '65 for 6 weeks. The person who replaced me was compromised, and then I was sent to replace him. And in the course of time, the U.S. generals, the American generals, and the aliens formed a committee and decided that they would pick just one observer, and they picked me. And as a committee decision, and that one observer would just be sent all the time and be the range weather observer, win, lose, or draw, no matter what happened. And so, therefore, in late '65 and early '66, after the selection process, I was given top secret orders. The orders were that I could go anywhere I wanted out in dreamland. The alien base is actually in Area 54, and the housing area is called Area 53. And Dreamland actually, at least at that time, and I presume the same is true today, was Area 53, Area 54, and parts of the Desert Southwest Game Range. When you're physically at Indian Springs and you're looking up the valley, Dreamland includes the mountains on the eastern side of the valley. My orders allowed me to go anywhere I wanted out in Dreamland, day or night, and but I had to do so alone. If I took anyone else out with me, I wouldn't be in any trouble, but the person who was with me might be shot, and they would be in serious trouble. When I received my orders, my commanding officer, a major, ordered me to into Nellis and to work the day shift on Sunday. On Sunday, the Nellis weather station is otherwise deserted, and the base operations part of the building is also deserted. And then he came in at noon to the Nellis Base Commander's office, where the Nellis Base Commander and the number 2 man had also come in to deliver the orders, which they had received from the Pentagon. And then the MPs escorted the major with my orders in hand over to the weather station. The MPs stayed outside, and the major called in his office, locked all the doors, and read me my orders. The orders began by saying nothing I did would ever be classified. That I could tell anyone I wanted or not tell anyone if I didn't want. I could never be inspected. No one could ever come out or ask me questions. They could listen if I felt like talking, but that was it. My command, he and my chain of command could not come out to the weather station. If there was an emergency and they needed to talk to me, they could only talk to me in the parking lot of the Chow Hall at Indian Springs. If they did so, as soon as they returned back to Nellis, as soon as they got back to the front gate, they had to report immediately to the neurosurgeon for debriefing. On the other hand, I could go and come anywhere I wanted. When he said I could go anywhere in Dreamland, I thought he meant that I could go to sleep on the job because I didn't know there was a Dreamland. And I was thinking, what a job, you know. When he finished, I wanted to make sure that that was okay because, you know, the military, you're not supposed to sleep on duty. And and so I said to him, I asked him, I said, will there be a cot or a bunk out at the weather station so that I can, you know, sleep? And he looked a little confused, and he said it was his understanding that Dreamland was a place, but that only I would know where that place was. And I thought, you know, he's just trying to be gentle and say, you sleep away, you know. That was the first I'd ever heard tell of Dreamland. The in the course of the 2+ years that I spent out on the ranges, the aliens who are tall and white and have family groups with women and children would frequently come down to where I was. As the weather observer, my duties were to go out to the ranges Monday through Friday, every day, to take the morning run. The morning run was at 4:30 a.m. To do so, you had to get up at 3 o'clock and drive out there at night, rain or shine. And then you had to fill, you had to start, there was a generator out, 2 generators out there, 2 diesel generators. You had to start up a generator so that you had some electricity and it would run the fan on the heater and so on, and the radio and the lights. And then you had to fill up a weather balloon with helium, attach a light, and release it. The children found that very entertaining. It was a pretty balloon with pretty lights. And so the mothers liked to bring the children down to look through my theatrical light. I was
God, my mind is just blown, bro. You know what I mean? It's amazing.
When I first encountered the aliens, I was terrified because they're not human. Reasonably, it probably took more than 6 months of terror that I felt when they came, even though they had not come to harm me. It's just that being out there at night in the desert and, say, hearing people walking behind your weather shack when you think you're alone, even if they were a priest, you'd be afraid, you know. But when you discover that they're not human, well, you know, this was the 60s. There was just, you know, it took a long time to get used to it. There was no briefing. The Air Force never said, this is the situation. The aliens never came and said, this is the situation. They never came to teach me anything. They came when they wanted. They left when they wanted. And therefore, it took me a long time to get used to it. Everything I know about the aliens, I had to figure out myself, or occasionally they would answer questions, but not very many, because they came for their purposes, and when they'd finished their purposes, they left. They were really quite friendly, but each one of them was an individual.
All right, so that's his first account, right? Is he's explaining like how he's interacting or what the interaction with them is an early morning, right before sunrise type of deal, and they're always pretty friendly. So far, so good. Just scroll through again once again, like what we're talking about, guys, is people like this. We think he's Fabio. but in reality, he could be an alien. Yeah, so there's been a bunch of wonderments about that, and then just recently I was watching a show where they were talking about how this dude got he woke up in the middle of the night and found a female tall white in his bedroom, and he sent off like a hair that he found that she had dropped when she was trying to leave, and he sent the hair off, and the scientist who did the hair tests, he reported back that it didn't look like normal human hair. It was of human origin, but it wasn't. He was like, and then he was like, the DNA that he found in the hair just didn't match either. He was like, dude, it's part Asian, and the hair is clear. It's not blonde. It's not dyed or bleached. It's not orange like it should be, or brown or blonde. He said it's like clear, and that's a different hair type. He said that's not new. That was one of the things I was reading up on, or a document that I had just come across. So that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, that's cool.
Here's their here's the ship that the Nordics usually use. Us humans, we've emulated this ship a few times. We have a few different ships that look like this ship as well. But like I was telling you on the phone earlier, it looks organic, and it's got just like one sharp line all the way around, and then it just looks like an organic, bio-organic type of shape. Unlike, to describe it for those who are just listening to the show, kind of thing, is it's got like a light bluish green and a yellowish color as like a gradient. So like when light hits it, it turns yellowish, but when it's in the shadows, it's got like greens and dark blues and stuff. And then the tall whites, the sharp edge of the ship comes right up to a shoulder of a tall white. So you're talking about a 7 to 9 foot tall being. So that's how big that ship line is. And it, like, from what they're also showing in size wise, is that a human is up to, it's above their head. It's like they're trying to say that like the human's below and the tall white's above, type of thing, like in the picture. And then they also give us like this weird little like picture down here of two aliens almost kissing, and then there's like a chalice as well, type of imagery. It's kind of cool down there. Probably exonews.tv is what that is for. Or at least that's what it's showing up on mine.
Yes,
And
the logo probably.
then here are some more of these guys. We'll leave this one up while we let this dude talk some more.
Well, interacting with them is sort of like interacting with the people in New York City. There are saints and there are sinners. There are people of all different walks of life and all different viewpoints. And so, I had some that were close friends, like, or almost like brothers, like the tour guide whose life I was credited with saving, and the teacher who credited me with saving her daughter's life. And on the other hand, there were some, like one of the alien generals, that, golly, I'm still afraid of him. I mean, if you met him, if he said stand there, you stood there. It was no back talk. The alien doctor who was the doctor that did the medical work on the tour guide, their CIA names. He was just a nice guy. He was the kind of guy that might come up and hug you if you let him. I never did. That freaked me out. But they just came in all different. You had to deal with each one of them as individuals. It took a while to get used to that, and it became a process of getting to know each one to the extent that
No one tells stories better than Audible, the home of storytelling. For motivation and comedy,
that you dealt with them like people. Base that they have up in Area 54, they use that base the same way that the U.S. Air Force or the U.S. Navy uses their bases, the way the Navy would use a base in the Philippines or on an island in the Pacific. At the base, at the alien base, the Tall White's deep spacecraft arrive and leave on schedule, and they arrive typically at sundown on the night of the full moon. Because they're gravity powered. They are typically at the base for 2 weeks, and then they leave at midnight on the night of the new moon because they're gravity powered, presuming everything is going well. During those 2 weeks, the spacecraft is refueled and repaired, and the people on board get off and stretch their legs. So at the base, there's a more or less permanent contingent of Tall Whites who are experienced in dealing with humans and typically who know English. And on the other hand, every 2 weeks, or every time a deep spacecraft arrives, there's a contingent of new arrivals, many of whom have never seen humans before. And while the spacecraft is being repaired and refurbished, then the experienced troops, the experienced Tall Whites, typically take those new arrivals who are brave enough, take them out and show them the town. You take them out and show them what humans are like. And of course, me running my weather station, I'm the test human, And so it was common every time there was a new moon for, after the new arrivals had rested up, for an experienced guard to bring around a group of new arrivals. The number of new arrivals could be anywhere from 2 or 3 to 20, depending on how many were brave enough to come watch Gorilla Charlie in the sagebrush. And so while the spacecraft was being repaired, they also had a technology exchange program with the U.S. Air Force, in which those technologies which they were willing to share with the Air Force, they would work on joint projects with the U.S. Air Force. They were only willing to share technology to the extent that it benefited them. For example, when the spacecraft was in port, they might need spare parts. Those spare parts might include radio equipment. Well, it was easier for them if they could just call up the U.S. Air Force and say, could we buy a new radio? You see? So it was and on the other hand, the Air Force and the Army can always use better radios, you see? And so it was common for them. So one area where they were obviously doing technology transfer was in the area of radio communications, so that we could build radios that they could use, and in return, we knew how to build better radios. Some technologies, like the secret to how they traveled faster than light, they were not willing to share. The idea of us having our own spacecraft traveling faster than the speed of light with nuclear weapons on board heading for their home planet, they didn't see where that was in their interest. And so when I say they were doing technology transfer with the Air Force, that was a negotiation where both sides mutually agreed that it was in their interest to do so. The Tall Whites live probably 10 times longer than we do. They live almost 700 years. And their spacecraft clearly travel faster than the speed of light. And they're humanoid. Their skin is as white as a piece of paper. Throughout much adult life, they're the same height that I am, 5'11", 6 feet tall. They have large eyes. Their eyes are perhaps twice as large as ours. They're typically blue, and then blue eyes with white pupils. Although when they get older, especially the men, their eyes take on a pink shade. Their eyes stretch further around the sides of their head than human eyes do, and their ears and their noses are only about half the size of human ears and noses, and their ears lay back along the side of their head more than a human does. Their lips are not as prominent as humans, and they don't have teeth. They just have ridges because they're plant eaters. They don't eat meat. They have much less hair than we do. They don't have any hair on their arms, and and the men don't have beards. On their head, they have only about half as much hair as humans, and their hair is so thin and transparent that they appear to be platinum blonde. Okay? Sometimes when they keep their hair cut short, sometimes they don't appear to have hair.
Yeah.
So let's just pinpoint on a couple things he said here in the last 5 minutes. I believe it was when we were kind of covering some of the Anunnaki stuff where they're talking about kind of the manipulation and creation of us, and they, we're talking about that they only gave us a fraction of their lifespan. So this isn't the first time that we've heard, talk of superior species living a lot longer than us. Another thing that I really wanted to point out when they started talking about the no facial hair thing is I was I wish I remember where I was getting this from, but I was watching a video and they're talking about, if you look back at, like people's ancestry, usually the people that grow bigger, thicker beards come from back in their past or their bloodlines past. They were warriors. They've proven that having a thicker beard versus having no beard can minimize the impact of a physical punch. The only reason I'm pointing this out is because of them being somewhat superior and not talking about having any facial at all. Well, that would make a lot more sense if they're not just sitting there going, having barbaric hand-to-hand combat. So that was kind of my first thought on, what would make sense to me and why they're not growing any facial hair. Because our facial hair has been grown to be, a tool in combat.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So I just thought that was kind of interesting. I wanted to point that out.
That's cool.
I like it.
I like that.
Good call. That is science. I have heard that. I'm not much of a beard guy, but yes, the science is proven, and it's also a visual cue in life. And the shape of the beard too is also part of this sacred geometry, or which would be the Fibonacci sequence, which we all have a different idea of what perfect is. You know what I mean? When we see something, we're like, oh, it's perfect looking. Not everybody sees the same thing, but we're seeing through the eyes of the Fibonacci sequence, and we all see it differently. So this is where this plays in. Interesting. Very interesting. Good
like
call.
That.
Yeah, and what I was gonna add to what Leprechaun was talking about was the Nordics. I was just watching this other documentary where it was a little more detailed about all the species. They were talking about all the species and where they lie on the star map. And what happened was the Nordics are supposed to be humanity's ancestral beings, where they took a lot of the DNA from the Nordics to create humans when they first created humans, and it was the tall grays who did it. So the tall grays took what happened was there was one planet where the Nordics had inhabited, and there was a war between the tall no there was a war between the Nordics and the reptilians. And the Nordics left. They escaped, and they ended up going to two other star systems. And on one of the star systems, they thrived really well, and then on one of the other star systems, they did mediocre. And so what happened was when the tall grays came through and found the Nordics, they were like, oh, hey, they're already a multiplanetary species. Let's go ahead and fuck with their genetics. And then they went to Earth and dropped off a bunch of genetically experimented Nordics. And that's where the seeding of humanity comes from.
Yeah, and that actually makes a ton of sense because when you hear about a lot of talk of the tall grays, they are very into that type of stuff where it's just the I'm not, I can't grab the word I want, but just like manipulating DNA and
Mhm.
that kind of line of thing where the like hybrid breeding type of stuff. Like that's very much one of the things when you dig into them and what you hear a lot about.
Yeah, and you also hear that from the person I got this report from, they said that this specific group of tall grays doesn't like to travel. They send the EBIN out, and the EBIN are actually drones. They're not real actual. They're non-player characters, bro. That's what the EBINs are, dude. They're legit. That's what they said. Like I was like, whoa, non-player characters are real. All right, this is interesting. So this is where my studying has come from, and what I like the people that I learned from and stuff. But the star map is so crazy because it's not linear; it's 4-dimensional. Like it's a 4-dimensional star map that I'm looking at when these people are talking, and so like, but it's all within a 30 light year range. It's all within 30. That's how big the star map is. It's only 30 light years big, which is just a fraction of the Milky Way.
Right.
It's just like the section we're in.
Right. Because when you break that idea of 30 light years down into the sciences that it takes to travel, all that, that's kind of like the interstate. There's still deep interstellar space travel, which is even bigger. So 30 light years or reality, people like, yeah, no, this is very achievable. And it takes a long time in the human mind, but with this technology that does exist and has for a while, it's quick. You can get there, and it's real.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
We are limited.
I sent you just something for us to cap on after this. I sent you like a little 8-minute video that I think it'd be probably good for us to share with people, just because we've been touching so many different alien species that it's just kind of a little kind of pull it all together to just kind of make people think and realize, they're not just all, gray or little green people or, whatever. So it's just somewhat we can throw in at the end if we're going to be covering more of this. It's kind of, be like, hey, this is kind of where we're coming from kind of a thing. But yeah, let's get back into this because we still got like an hour of this guy's interview still.
Yep.
They're much frail. They're built. Their body structure is more frail than ours. The alien whose CIA name was Range 4 Harry, for example, one time I saw him walking in the soft dirt over on the southwest side of the Range 3 lounge, and after he had left, I went over and measured the depths of the footprints he left. And from those, I estimated that he only weighed between 90 and 110 pounds, even though he was the same height as I am. Their arms, their bones are only about half as big as ours. Their thumbs are only about half as long, but their fingers are longer in proportion to their hand than ours, and they're way more flexible. But it also means that they're not built for heavy lifting. We're built like gorillas compared to them.
Right.
See? They have men, women, and children. And if the men and women are standing side by side and not walking or moving, it's frequently not possible to tell which one is the man and which one is the woman, especially for the young adults. When they get older, then there are obvious differences, but in the facial structure and the bones and stuff. But especially for the young adults, it's entirely possible for two of them to be standing side by side. And if they're not moving, to be not sure if you're talking to men or women. Once they start moving, though, then it's very obvious which ones are the men and which ones are the women. Because the men are more like human men. When they walk, they kind of go pound, pound, pound. Whereas the women are much lighter on their feet and much more animated. The women are much more like human women, much more willing to talk than the men. It wouldn't be at all unusual for, say, four young men to come around and not have any reason to say anything and not say anything. To just come around, to just come and not say hello, not say goodbye, not say anything in between, and just stand and look at you. Whereas the women, if they came, usually the women would say something like, typically, is it okay if the children play while you release the balloon? Or usually, if you ask the women something, they would have some questions, or at least some conversation. But they never came the tall whites never came just to talk with me. If they were talking with me, it was always as part of the reason they came. The women were very proud of the fact that they loved their children. The men were too, but the women were immensely proud of it. If a tall white lady came and she had children with her, a very common way for her to start the conversation would be for her to ask me, using English, which she had learned, do I understand that they love their children more than human women love their children? Or in other words, I want to make sure my children are safe, you see. And of course, when I said, yes, I understand that, then they would noticeably relax and feel happier. If a tall white lady came with children and she didn't say anything, a common way for me to start the conversation would be for me to say, I understand that you love your children more than human women love their children. And then she'd relax and feel better. In many ways, the tall white women were like female gorillas.
That's a fucked up way to say that.
So
I mean,
consider
I
the
get what they're
children
saying,
the
though. I mean,
untouchable, okay? If you touch the children, the mother might kill you, no matter how
Right.
pleasant she seems,
Very powerful entities.
no matter how close the child came. So, for example, and I speak from direct experience, if I was standing by my theodolite and the child wanted to look through the theodolite and the child was right there.
Google that, people. Theodolite.
Online.
That is
I
an
was
amazing piece of
worried about
equipment. You've never seen that? That'll blow your mind.
afraid I might make the wrong choices. You know, what role do I choose? What's the best class? But then I started playing, and there were no classes.
Sorry.
Theodolite and the child was right there.
Theopolis.
There's no way in the world that it would be suicide for me to reach over and touch the child. That will upset them. And for example, on one evening, this tall white lady came who I had seen a few times before, but she wasn't a regular. And she brought 3 children with her. And she was somewhat older than the typical young adult and therefore somewhat taller. She was 6'1", 6'2". And following the usual so-called protocol, she had come down the bunker road with her 3 children in an obvious manner to let me get used to the idea that she was coming with her kids. And then when she got to the end of the bunker road where the range boards were, she began approaching me directly. I was halfway across the square. And as she got closer, perhaps 20 feet, 15 feet, even though I'd gotten over my fear of the tall whites, because you had to treat each one as an individual, I found it a little intimidating that she was coming that close. And so I backed away from my theodolite towards the generator shack. And she said, is it okay if the children look in my weather shack while I took my report? And I said yes. And so I backed away to the generator shack and stood with my back to the wall of the generator shack and left her standing just to the northeast of my theodolite and, said, take all the time you want. And so then the 3 children went into my weather shack like kids do, and they didn't touch anything or move anything, but they were just looking around out of curiosity. As I and at the time, as she stood there, she was looking at her children who were in the shack. Now, I'm not sure they were all her children. Usually, when the tall white lady came with 3 children, the typical contingent, 1 would be hers and 2 would be the children of someone else. Typically, she'd be babysitting 2 kids and bringing 1 of her own. And so she was watching the children. I became concerned because I had a can of Coca-Cola, which was in a metal can, sitting on one of the shelves. Now, the tall whites wore suits when they came at night that put out a zone of fluorescent light and radioactive particles. The suits protected them from things, like if you threw a rock at them, the rock wouldn't hit them. It would get to that zone and fall to the ground. It also allowed them to levitate, especially the children.
That's an interesting
But they
thing
had
to
to
hear.
balance themselves when they did so. So the children might use the suits to levitate.
It's probably conscious reactive, because aggression would make it fly back and hurt the person. but
was
just
as all
neutral
the
aggression just neutralized the rock and
I
dropped it.
became concerned that since the children had their suits on, usually the kids turned off the power to their suits when they went in my shack. I became afraid that they would get next to that can of Coca-Cola and might be in some danger, in which case I might be blamed, you know. It would have been, it would have been suicide for me to go over to my weather shack and speak to the children. You know, the mother might well have killed me if I'd done that. There's no way in the world you could go over there and say, children, don't do this, children, don't do that. You're just taking your life in your hands to try that.
Wow.
You have to talk to the mother, you know, and that's how the tall whites are. And on the other hand, she wasn't looking at me at the time. And so what I did is I took 2 steps forward and stopped and stood there with my hands at my side and my feet, you know, not moving, and waited for her to see me. And of course, when I took 2 steps forward and stopped, then she looked over where I was immediately. And then when I had her attention, I said, I'm worried about the safety of the children. I have a can of Coca-Cola there in that can, and I'm worried that the children might be in some danger if they get too close to it. And the mother said, I'll handle it. And then the mother obviously communicated with the children, and the children were very well behaved, and they stayed away from my can of soda pop. The children never disobeyed their parents that I ever saw, and the parents would do anything for their children. So when they traveled in family groups, they were very tightly knit. When the women came around, they never came around alone. None of the tall whites ever came around alone. They always came around in groups, and the adults were always well armed. But it was common for the women to be very proud of their family relationships. The men were too, but it was just more common for the women to describe it. So it was very common, say, like if a group of them came around, for the lady to say,
I am so excited to show you what we've been working on for the last 4 years. Marvel's.
No. Group of them came around, for the lady to say things like, the guard on the tower is my mother's brother's son, and just identify who all their friends were, if they were, who they were related to and who they weren't related to, and far more so than what humans would do. They did more than just travel in family groups. They appeared to maintain very tightly knit family relationships.
Ten times longer than humans.
Tall whites live approximately 10 times longer than humans live. And they don't age the way we do. When they get throughout most of their adult life, as I said, they're about our height, 5'10", 5'11", 6 feet. But then when they get equivalent in age to a human who is perhaps 39 or 40 years old, and for them that's perhaps 400 years old, then they start growing again. And as instead of aging the way we do, as they grow older, they go through several more growth periods. This is not necessarily good for them because only their bones and muscles grow. Their internal organs don't grow in proportion. Pretty soon they get very tall, 8.5 feet tall, but their organs aren't able to support their body. So as they get taller, they become more fragile. Eventually, after 600 or 700 years, or in there somewhere, there comes a growth phase where they begin growing again, and their organs can't support it, in which case they die. Usually by the time they get to be 8 feet tall, they're fragile, and usually aliens that tall are accompanied by younger adults to steady them. Living longer does have some drawbacks. For one thing, their bodies do not heal as quickly as ours. If they break a leg, and they're very fragile, so they break easy, it may take their bones 5 Earth years to heal. Whereas, as you know, a young person, when I was young, if I broke a leg, could heal up in, I don't know, a few weeks or so. I'm not a medical doctor, but would heal up much faster. Cuts and scratches, for example, when I was young, one time, for example, and I was out on the ranges, one day I scratched myself in a very ordinary fashion in the morning. By the afternoon, it had already healed up nicely, and by the next day, I had almost forgotten about it. The next day, a group of tall whites came around with the experienced tall white and some young arrivals, and they were very impressed that my body had already healed. For them, that would have taken several weeks to have healed up like that. Also, although they're considered to be more intelligent than we are because their nervous system runs 2 or 3 times faster than ours does, it does have some drawbacks. They tend to, when they're doing something, they tend to focus in on it more carefully than a human would. And they're therefore very easy to surprise when they're engaged in something. One time, when a group of tall whites came around with the usual experienced guard and a group of new arrivals, it was the morning run, and I was young. I was doing what we all do. I was drinking soda pop. I was eating peanuts. I was talking. I was playing to the music. I was doing my balloon. I'd released a balloon, and I was tracking my balloon at the theodolite. And I was singing some songs and dancing around too, to some Mick Jagger songs, all kind of at the same time while writing down my numbers. And one of the new arrivals asked the experienced guard, "Are all humans able to do that?" Because I was multitasking. The tall whites wouldn't have done it that way. They would have just eaten and concentrated on eating, or they would have just taken the readings and concentrated on the readings, or sang their song and concentrated on singing their song. For that, and so they appreciated, as I did, one of the first agreements that I negotiated with them. We agreed that they wouldn't come up behind me and scare me. They could do so very easily. And I wouldn't come up behind them and scare them. You see, if I saw one of them out in the desert and it didn't appear that he had seen me, that I wouldn't approach him. I would just stay where I was and sing, make a sound or sing one of my songs, such as the song by Ricky Nelson, "It's Up to You," because I've done everything, and until I was sure they had seen me. And then I wouldn't approach him. I would just stay where I was. And if they chose to come closer to me, they could approach me as close as they felt until they didn't feel comfortable. An experienced troop might come right up to you 10, 15 feet. A new arrival might stay back out there a quarter mile because it varied depending on which one you were talking to. On the other hand, if they chose to move away or to run away, I wouldn't pursue. Okay, I would stay where I was, and they could leave and they could come whenever they wanted and leave whenever they wanted. The reverse was true. If they were approaching me and they got too close so that I felt uncomfortable, as in the case of the tall white lady at the theodolite stand, I would back away and they would stay where they were until I had backed away to where I felt comfortable. So that before we began talking, we would first come to a distance where we both felt comfortable. You see, I've always felt that was, and then if I got too uncomfortable, if I felt like going away, they wouldn't pursue. And I felt that was very important in being able to deal with the tall whites because it allowed both me and the tall white individual, whichever one I was dealing with, to come to a common distance where we were willing to talk to each other. For some, like the teacher or Range Fort Harry, that might be as little as 10 feet. For others, like that tall white general, well, I didn't want him closer than a quarter mile, yeah, and
Wow.
that was a real important, that was one important agreement that we agreed on. And if I were to see one today out in the desert or out in Indian Springs Valley or out in the town of Indian Springs or whatever, I would still be living by that agreement. I have a master's degree in nuclear physics, and I believe that I figured out how their deep spacecraft worked, at least in general detail. And I copyrighted that in a scientific paper I call Hall photon theory. It's included in the appendix of Book 3, Millennial Hospitality 3, The Road Home. I believe their scout craft and their deep spacecraft had a double hull construction. And for example, in the case of the scout craft, in between those two hulls, they had what appeared to be 1,000 miles of fiber optic windings. They built the scout craft using materials supplied them by the U.S. Air Force.
Cool.
The scout craft were clearly built here on this Earth. When you went on board, many of the parts, like the seats, still had the mold markings of American manufacturers like Lockheed, Boeing, the overhead compartments by Airstream, and so on. And so, therefore, it had to be perfectly possible to build a scout craft with its anti-gravity drive using ordinary American parts. The scout craft had the fiber optics windings came in several sets, and the way it worked is it worked in a manner philosophically the same as an electromagnet. It's just that they did not. In an electromagnet, you use electrons on copper going down copper wires and coils. Instead, instead of electrons, they used some other subatomic particle. I'm not sure which one. It's my understanding that there are 3 different ones, or maybe 5 different ones, perhaps mesons or bosons or those subatomic particles, and then that put out anti-gravity. The particle generators looked like batteries, where there was one that would create the particles and accelerate them into the fiber optics, and then the fiber optics amplified the anti-gravity field the same way that an electromagnet amplifies the electric field or the magnetic field. And then there was another one that picked up the particles. Of course, they had to be refueled after, they had to be recharged just the way a battery had. Charged just the way a battery
Commercial.
recharged. The same technology was used on their suits, the ones that allowed them to levitate. And if they were running the suit at full power and they came out from their rest area at 11:30 at night, then by 5:30 in the morning, the suit was almost out of power. So that the batteries they had on their suits would only last 6 hours or so. The batteries on the deep spacecraft obviously also had a limit to how long, had to be recharged periodically. Although I'm not sure how long that limit was, but it perhaps depended on the craft. The deep spacecraft would arrive and leave on schedule, and the shortest schedule was 2.5 months. The longest schedule that I saw was 5 years. So they had to be able to carry fuel to recharge the battery for that long, or their technology had to allow the batteries to be recharged for that long. But they didn't have to be recharged. You did have to periodically and put in a new power source. The outer set of coils served to streamline the craft for travel within space itself. And when the outer set of coils were powered up, it also protected them from the forces of acceleration and deceleration. As I described in Book 2, it was common to see the scout craft, if it were sitting out in the desert some distance, and perhaps, say, 3 miles, when it was sitting there unpowered, it would just look like a white ellipsoid with windows and the way you'd expect. When they powered up the outer set of coils, it would take on a fuzzy appearance. The outer field obviously protected them from radiation in space as well. Then, when they lifted up off the desert, if they had the outer coils energized, they were capable of tremendous performance. It was common to see the scout craft accelerate from 0 to 8,000 miles an hour travel just a short distance, like 7 miles or 10 miles, stop and set down again, and then turn off the coils. The people on board didn't belt themselves in, they just sat in chairs the way we do, because they didn't feel the force of acceleration. If they did not have the coils powered up, however, if they were bringing the scout craft in real close, like if they were going to park beside the Range 3 lounge, they would turn off the outer set of coils while they were still some distance away, because the field coming off that outer set of coils extended a great distance from the craft. Of course, before they turned off the coils, they would first slow to maybe 3 or 5 miles an hour. And then once they turned off the coils, then they drove it like a baby buggy. Okay. Then they just came in real slow and landed like at 2 or 3 miles an hour. And when they took off, if they hadn't charged up the coils, then they would be traveling just 2 or 3 miles an hour. They'd be traveling like a baby buggy. And they wouldn't, but it wasn't until they powered up that outer set of coils that they would start doing high-speed performance. Powering up the coils took a little while, just like turning on an electromagnet. It was common for it to take as long as 10 seconds for the coils to power up. Because the particles that are running through the fiber optics are subatomic particles that do decay, the coils would heat up if you ran at full power for too long. And the tall whites were always very conscious of the temperature of the coils. And therefore, it was very common to see them when they sat down on the desert on occasion, especially on hot days, to get out and open up the panels on the outside of the deep space, on the outside of the scout craft, obviously just letting the coils cool off. It doesn't mean the coils were necessarily too hot, but they liked the coils running cold, and they were always very conscious of the coil temperature. On that day, that scout craft suffered a meltdown of the fiber optics. Now that, as I remember, was a Wednesday, and they worked on that craft from Wednesday, 24 hours a day, till the following Monday morning, just getting enough coils repaired so that they could lift off and take it back to the base. And in order to take it back to the base, they had to bring out 2 extra scout craft. In the meantime, they brought out several others with mechanics and stuff. And they had to nurse it back to base by running 2 extra scout craft on each side, just to get it back to base where they could fiddle with the coils. Recovering from a coil meltdown was obviously a big problem for them. I never saw any humans.
Commercial.
Oh, they're so loud.
Working on the coils. The tall whites were I never saw any Air Force personnel or anybody out there with them. The tall whites always reserved the option, or anything to do with the coils, they always wanted only tall whites on there. As far as I know, I'm the only human that got anywhere close to the coils. I got to within a few hundred feet before their guard blocked my way and made it clear that he didn't want me to go any closer. It might have been because since they're running subatomic particles, maybe he was concerned about the radioactive fields coming off it. But he didn't want me up there touching them or anything. I've been on board the scout craft, but not on board the deep spacecraft. The deep spacecraft, which are the same design and the same.
All right. So this craft right here, this is technically what would be a scout craft. I don't think this would be a deep spacecraft. I feel like this is what attaches to a deep spacecraft, and then in unison they work together to travel through the deep space.
Yep,
Right.
I agree.
That's why we have the idea of the core fighter in the Gundam. You know what I mean? It's a multi-system kind of idea, because we all have to work together. It takes larger components in the macro view to create something large enough to be able to travel, withstand these types of elements and types of physical fundamentals that are out there in that deep space. That's why there's large objects like Jupiter, Saturn, gigantic gas giant planets with such a big gravity that it holds gas into a ball. So yeah.
So far, here's what doesn't add up to me though. We just went through a whole process of him explaining to us how fragile these beings are. How is it that they can pilot or even be in a ship that has this kind of maneuverability? What kind of dampeners or safety mechanisms do these people have installed into this ship to stop them from, snapping every bone in their body when they take a left turn?
Right.
You know
Well,
what I mean?
I guess it's the idea of if they're able to travel through space like that, then they're inside of a electromagnetic bubble that negates all of that, so that, or maybe even another type of generator that produces a type of gyroscopic effect where it tilts in the axis of where it's traveling, but it totally dampens the electromagnetic gravity. Like it produces a repelling system within the bubble of the gravity magnetics that creates that incredible travel speed and capability.
Okay. Yeah, because that's just, my curiosity going, hey, you said these dudes couldn't take a punch, but at the same time, they can hit a 6G turn. Like, come on now.
Well, I mean, that
Right.
could also easily have something to do with, the suits that they've been describing and what those suits are capable of as well. That could be a big part of why those suits are
Yeah,
capable
that brings up
of what they are.
that from that
We
movie,
use
My
pressure
Favorite
suits
Martian.
for
Dude, they had that
aircraft
suit.
pilots, high altitude, high speed. They use pressure suits to. It's 111. They use pressure suits to keep the blood flow in the brain in high G turns, stuff
Yeah,
like that. It's the idea of what we're trying to use, create an artificial ability to withstand more.
I suppose.
Mm.
But I don't know. That's my question. That's my, so.
I kind of
I
feel like
like
we're
you
all
guys'
right.
answers.
We're all
You guys
wrong.
got good answers. I do like you guys' answers. I'm just saying that was a big question I had right there. Like I was getting a disconnect and everything. So all right, let's get back to that. Like
Technology
rush
is
through
much
this.
larger. Our titanium black, right? The one that came in damaged with meteor damage. That is I got closer to that one than any of the other deep spacecraft. That one I got within a few hundred feet of as it came by me in the snowstorm. And so I did see a great deal about the deep spacecraft, but the only people I ever saw, the only creatures I ever saw in the deep spacecraft were the tall whites themselves. On the scout craft, however, it was common to see American U.S. Air Force generals on the scout craft along with their tall white counterparts. That was very common. And I myself was on the scout craft. However, they never came to just take me for a joyride. They never came to say, oh, let me show you the sun and the moon and the stars. I don't know, maybe they would have if I'd asked them, but they knew that we had rank and that I was an enlisted man, the lowest of the low. If there's a latrine to be cleaned, I'll be the one doing the work. And they were well aware that generals who show up with 4 stars knew perfect were given the orders, and I was pretty much taking them. So it's not like they, it's not like they ever came purely to entertain me with their scout craft. On occasion, when I was on board their scout craft, remember they had several new arrivals who were part of the technology transfer, and their motivation for taking me on board the scout craft on that particular day appeared to be that the new arrivals who were afraid of me had to practice coming up to Charlie and saying hello, Charlie, and then once having gotten to within 10 feet of the gorilla, then they would back away and stay out there like 20 feet. They'd so bravely faced me down in the sagebrush, I guess. But I guess what they were thinking of, I believe what they were thinking of on that day is that they were going to suggest to the American generals additional technology exchange projects. And I think they were using me as the test guinea pig to take me on board the scout craft and show me their living quarter, show me what was on board the scout. And then they could test my reaction to what I thought was good and what I thought was, what I was impressed with and what I wasn't with. And then I think they were saying, therefore, then when they went and talked to the American generals, they could say, we'll make this better for you and that not so good for you. Or, we'll make this better for you. We can help you here.
You get a commercial? Yeah. Close.
Switching
The
of chapters.
sculpture was made completely out of American parts and looked like an RV trailer. When you went on board, it was ellipsoidal, and the scout craft was white with windows on both sides, and more windows. The door, when you looked at the front of when you were standing looking at the front of the scout craft, the door was on that craft was on the right. Since they were all made here, there was a number of different variations in the design, and the windows on that side extended further back than on the left side. There were no windows on the back, none on the top, none on the bottom, and only one door, the one on the right, which opened from the top, and much like a Learjet.
No one tells stories better than Audible, the home of
Oh
storytelling.
yeah.
From motivation and comedy,
Much like a Learjet, or some Learjets. When you went on board, there was a bulkhead about a third of the way back. In front of the bulkhead on all the scout craft, the design was the same. There were 5 seats without seat belts that you just sat in. The tall whites are not built strong like we are, and so the idea of belting themselves in would damage their bodies. There was 2 seats for the pilot and the co-pilot, and then 3 other seats in the front. And they weren't very interested in showing me the cockpit area. They said there wasn't much about it that I would understand anyway. On the bulkhead, there was a set of panels. Nowadays, we consider it old hat, switches that don't move like you have on microwave ovens. But in the 60s, that was considered pretty avant-garde, even though I realized that the first motionless switch was actually copyrighted in more or less about 1929. But it's still, they weren't in common use. On each switch, there were a set of icons. Now we consider that old hat too, because you get by your car and there's icons. But in the 60s, that was considered pretty avant-garde. The icons were pretty ordinary. One controlled the outside lights, and it looked like the sun. One controlled the inside lights, and so in terms of the icons, there wasn't or the hieroglyphs on the switches. They weren't very different than, say, hieroglyphs on the Egyptian pyramids or the icons that you see on a modern-day automobile. Behind the bulkhead, there were at least 3 or 4 different designs depending on which model of the scout craft you were looking at. In the RV model, the one that on that day that I was on, what was behind the bulkhead was an ordinary RV. When you went in there and you were looking towards the back, on the right there was a microwave oven, only where the aliens had taken off the mechanical door and put on a different cover with coils around it. And then when they turned on the oven, they first turned on the coils, and the coils put out the standard field and prevented the microwaves from going through that field into the room beyond. So it looked like a little cave where you turn it on and then turn it off, and you didn't have to fiddle with the door. You see? In the back was the latrine, just like in an RV. On the left, they had the seats where you would eat, but also they had hammocks where the children would sleep. And then they had the overhead compartment and a few storage things in the back, although not a great many of them. And then on the bulkhead in the front, they had a mirror and a makeup table where the teacher would put on her stuff. And it was all pretty ordinary. That was the RV model.
Right out of Jetson.
The
My
RV
website
model.
is millennialhospitality.net, where I have additional information related to my books and the Millennial Hospitality series. The number of tall white aliens at the base varied somewhat depending on how many deep spacecraft were in port. However, as I describe in Book 3 in the chapter entitled The End of Innocence, on one night I saw between 200 and 300 different tall white individuals. There were so many I couldn't count them. Lined up along the mountains to the east up along where the ammunition bunker was. On the night that the tall white lady known as Pamela was supposed to finish her final exam to be head of the technology transfer team to go into Livermore. On that night, as I described in my book, she panicked and failed. But in amongst those 200 or 300 tall whites, and that's just an estimate because I couldn't. It was a crowd of people, and I couldn't count them all. There were also American Air Force personnel. Nobody below the rank of colonel. There was like a 4-star general, a 3-star general. There were several of them. There were also several American government people in civilian clothing over there. The tall white individuals that they were talking to appeared to come from all walks of life. Some of the tall whites were clearly the tall white equivalent of generals. Others were clearly the equivalent of tall white civilian government people. But there were an awful lot of tall whites who weren't obviously part of the military, but were just women and children. At one point, for example, the tall white lady whose CIA name was the teacher was standing out in front of the line with a group of children around her and was pointing out the position of the balloon that I had released and where it was in the sky for them to all watch the balloon floating. And the tall white said,
What would it be like if you couldn't just come to a game and drop $100 through all the cards right away? So we explode.
Oh, horrible commercials.
And the tall whites had a social structure, a division of labor, very similar to our own. And so some were military people, some were medical people, and they had personalities accordingly. On that night, I counted between 35 and 50, perhaps as many as 75 scoutcraft that had parked in the part of the desert that I had dubbed the parking area. There were so many, I lost count of the numbers. I couldn't count them all, but I estimated that somewhere between 35 and 50 was a reasonable count, but there may have been 75. So the number of tall white individuals and scoutcraft, was at least that large. I have no idea if that was everybody on the base that had come down, or if that what percentage that was, but the number of people that you could see, the number of individuals that you could come across, was at least in that numeric range. The number, when they came around to where I was, they came around, the kinds of individuals that came around were from all walks of life. And the tall white doctor came around and the tall whites he brought with him appeared to be medical students. They had no interest in the mechanical aspects of what I was doing, although the doctor, like a human doctor, cared only about the humanistic aspects. On the other hand, on a different night, one of the tall white guards brought around 3 young adult tall white men who were clearly electrical engineers. One of the tall white individuals that I was reasonably good friends with called himself co-pilot, but he was very proud of his ability to repair the scoutcraft, and he wanted to have been called the mechanic, but I guess the name was taken, and so he had to pick a different name, And another one was called the captain. He didn't appear to understand humans very well, and he didn't appear to want to. He appeared to just want to come and do whatever he had to do, and then if whatever you were for humans, well, that was you, and go on about his business. For the doctor decided what to win, he wanted to come and really understand humans, what it is. You see, others like the tall white general that I previously referred to, the idea of him understanding anybody, that he didn't care to understand anybody. He came to give the orders, and you were there to take them. And if you liked him, fine. If you didn't like him, fine. But he was the general. They were all like that. The teacher was there and with the guards, and the children were playing on the steps of the control tower. And I walked over close to her, 10 feet or so, and on that night she was willing to answer a few questions. And I asked what she thought of humans and the planet Earth. I asked her how it compared with other inhabited planets that they had seen. And she said that they considered the earth to be a cold, desolate wilderness. On the other hand, she said the thing that they found unique about humans is our willingness to do things with animals. Her her example was that I grew up
It's skipping a little bit.
riding horses, making pets with dogs. Yet each of those animals could kill me if they wanted to. I don't think of it that way because instead, like all humans, I first try to decide how the animal is thinking, and then I approach the animal accordingly. So I calm down the horse by speaking to it nicely and approaching it from the front. I put the cow in a stanchion and calm it down and begin milking. I make friends with the dog by feeding it and patting it on its head. She said that they considered that to be very unusual. She said that on most inhabited planets, once a group of intelligent people evolved, they had no interest in dealing with the less intelligent animals and usually just killed them all off.
Wow.
It's interesting.
They had no intent that she pointed out that I felt comfortable with pets of cows, making pets of dogs, making pets of, she referred to the time a few days earlier that I'd been down playing with some of the dogs that really weren't my dogs, but from people that lived in the housing area, feeding them and teaching them to roll over and sit up. She said, usually the intelligent people.
This is you. Wait, no, this is
No,
you.
it's not me.
Conquer the world of Albion?
She said, usually the intelligent people just, don't care what the dog thinks, just shoots them, and they found humans to be very unusual in that regard. And the way she described it is because we were willing, even though we were intelligent, we were willing to try to think like less intelligent animals.
It's interesting.
Very.
They always came.
Yes, that's something that's interesting. So
I want to interject real quickly. That's what makes us different than animals, and that's what gives us what everybody calls the spirit. We have a consciousness. We can have a decision. Animals do also, but they make that decision based consciously on their awareness and their field of awareness as to, is it a threat, is it a friendly, and are they hungry, and what natural aspects. We, on the other hand, right, Garden of Eden idea, snake in the ear, blah, 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 we can choose to do what we're supposed to do that's right, or we can choose what to do is wrong. And that makes it a very critical decision in the way the human mentality works out.
So it kind of, for me, the word that keeps ringing in my head is, animal instincts. Your first initial instincts is that could be dangerous. I'm going to take care of it first, which is almost kind of the feeling of how they were describing other intelligent races. Like, no, like, you're worthless to me. Like, I'm just going to off you and I don't got to think about you. I don't know. That's very, I don't know. I didn't.
Very detached.
Yeah, and I wasn't expecting, I guess, that type of an example for him to use and that type of outcome of the explanation of it. I guess that's something else. So one thing, real quick, we should throw up a couple of QR codes to some of the people sponsoring.
Yeah, well, we're on a break.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's do that. From our sponsors at Clarksville Hobby Depot LLC, you can head on over there through this link. Over there in the chat, there's a link, and there's this QR code up on the screen. We're Clarksville Hobby Depot LLC. They've got this really cool quad drone, and it's got a 1080p camera attached to it. It comes with some extra parts, batteries, and controller, and a cute little carrying case that makes it all super neat to pack away in your vehicle while you're on the go. It's a great option. So head on over to our sponsors, Clarksville Hobby Depot LLC, and pick you up a really sweet drone.
I love my drones. Go for it.
And this is going to be the last night you can get this deal, this buy one, get one Kit Bash Gundam stickers by the Model Rocketeer. Take it away, Kerry. Tell us about it.
Absolutely. Yeah. This is to sponsor what it is we do and put on a little pride and show the world, what you represent. The Kit Bash Gundam hangar crew. And also with that, it'll be a buy one get one, so you can put one on you can slap one on your truck, your car, on your workbench, and a limited edition holofoil. Because what I want to do is try this year to get a new design going up. So I think I'm going to try to launch a poll where we can get some of the members active and vote on some designs that I'm going to come up with. So I'm going to sit through that idea and see what we can do. Because I'm just trying to keep it really simple. You know what I mean? As a new member patch. So think of it that way. It's going to be kind of like that military idea. We're going to create a patch. It'll be a circle. We can do different shapes, but I will, reveal that here soon. So I really appreciate everybody's support, man. And this is what we're doing. We're trying to create a new part of the industry, a new welcome door in this industry where you can come and do your thing and be yourself and learn to use that as a tool to help yourself and help others, be a positive force. The high vibe and forces of good.
Love it.
Awesome. And if you want, on the top corner of the screen is a QR code that you can snap to get some more content from our co-host Leprechaun here over on his Twitch page where he plays loads of video games. Mainly right now, I think he's been focusing on the Harry Potter world. So if you guys want to see what's going on in Leprechaun's corner of the universe, hit that QR code and you can support him over there.
Also, too, for anybody out there listening that might be a Magic fan, right? Mike's a Magic fan, so Leprechaun's going to be bringing us awesome new content soon enough in the world of Magic and what it means to be a card collector, or be a real, a top ranked type of player and know what you're doing. Because what is it, Mike? Some of these are worth good money. They're very powerful cards. It's an awesome community within itself, and just like any other community, that toxicity has an ability to seep in everywhere, and we are just a light that stamps that shit out. In Leprechaun's world, being Magic, this is how it works, man. Another awesome force of good, bringing this positivity and this enlightenment to an awesome industry, which is tabletop gaming or card gaming, trading card gaming. There we go, TCG. I want to get it right.
Yeah, no, I mean it's it's whatever you make of it, but at the end of the day, it's all about getting together with friends and just having some fun, sitting down and doing something where you're shooting your shit.
Yep. Yeah. Awesome. So this QR code that's sitting up now is for the Patreon for WebC Official. So head on over there if you want to become a paid sponsor for our channel. And all of our shows will give you shout outs and all sorts of things. And then if anybody's out there on Facebook, Twitch, Twitter, all the other things except for YouTube, there's a QR code that brings you directly to WebC Official, where you can get all of our videos when they happen. All right, and back to the show.
Now the children weren't armed, and the adults that were very old typically weren't armed. But the young adults and the older adults that weren't too fragile, they always came armed. Their weapons typically appeared to be look like white pencils with a certain squarish cross section. The young adults typically carried weapons that were perhaps 6 inches long. The older adults typically carried weapons that were longer, presumably with greater power. The weapon worked like a microwave laser. The weapon could be adjusted for frequencies appropriate for different elements. If they adjusted it for the frequency of sodium, for example, in the human nerves there are sodium atoms and calcium atoms. And if they adjusted it for sodium and fired it at you, it would make it seem like you were getting an electric shock. Like, depending on the power of the weapon, it would feel like you just touched a high voltage wire of 100,000 volts and was extremely painful. If they set it high enough, they could kill you by just going zappo and you'd be electrocuted. If they had it set low, then it would just give a tingling affair. They never actually used the sodium setting on me, but I did meet, for example, a CIA guard who said that one day he had been walking with the teacher coming down the steps of the Capitol building. And because their bone structure is slightly different than ours, he wasn't familiar with the way they look when they're walking down steps. And he said they were partway down, and it looked to him like the teacher was going to fall. And so without thinking, he reached out and grabbed her by the elbow to steady her. And he said she almost killed him. She jerked the weapon, set it to the sodium setting, and had him down on his knees, saying, "You think we're fools? You think we're idiots? You think I'd come here if I couldn't take care of myself?" And she said, it was all he could do to breathe when she used that weapon on him. And he was absolutely terrified of her. She put him through 5 or 10 minutes of, who's giving the orders and who's taking them. And there's nothing but yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. And and they never did that to me. Although in addition to the guard, I met a number of guards. Another set, if they moved it to the calcium setting, then it was like putting you to sleep or calming you down. So like if you were standing there and they did it to you, you might not be able to move your feet, but you wouldn't actually feel terrified. They didn't use the calcium setting very often. One of the weapons they could set to hypnotize a person. When they used that setting, they typically liked a clean shot at one of your temples. And what it would do is induce the same as if you were hypnotized. They could turn it on instantaneously and turn it off instantaneously. And it was common to have missing time experiences. One day I was walking from my theodolite stand to the weather shack. It happened a large number of times, but on this day in particular. And it was like 19 or 20 steps from the theodolite stand to my weather shack. And I could clearly remember taking step 12. And I could clearly remember finishing step 14. But in between those two steps, almost 20 minutes went by. It used to annoy me greatly until I'd finally gotten to where I could break through that hypnotism by relaxing and letting your mind wander. And what had happened was, it was one of the early days in '65. Range 4 Harry had brought some new arrivals around, and he had stepped out from the shed and took a clean shot at my right temple and hypnotized me as I was taking step 13. And then
commercial
shot at my right temple.
Is that princess that's snoring in the background?
And then while I stood there, he brought up the new arrivals and said, "This is Charlie. See, he's got."
Yes, I'm sorry.
Just like you do when you're
Princess.
So
Holy moly, that's a good snore, though.
This is what
She's a love dog.
When they all went back in, then he's, really, it took him about 20 minutes to go through his introducing them to a human routine, and then released it, and then went on. Because of a number of episodes like that, I used to have a policy of writing the time down when I did things. So I used to have a policy of writing down the time, and before I started walking back to my weather shack, of writing down on my weather report, when I left the theodolite stand, and then writing down on my weather report when I got to my weather shack. And of course, it should only be like a minute or two, you see, and just to see if they'd done that to me, and I didn't remember it because they could do it so quickly. I'll say one more thing about the weapons. They had another setting that I know about, the iodine setting, and if they hit me with the iodine setting, especially in the thyroid area, it would affect the iodine in your blood. And it would alter the chemistry of the blood so that your blood would seep through the arteries and you'd bleed to death in like 2 minutes.
Eat a dick.
Now, nothing I did was ever classified. Nobody ever gave me a briefing before I went out there. Nobody ever gave me a briefing when I came back. My orders said that nothing I did was ever classified. I was never part of a project. We were never building like airplanes or missiles. So therefore, I was never shown any classified drawings or anything like that.
No, I believe
Everything
that.
I know I had to figure out for myself. There's a good reason for that. The aliens don't handle anger the way humans do. When they become angry, they either go away or they kill you, or there's humans. We get angry with each other and we fight and we become good friends. The aliens, at least where humans are concerned, or at least my experiences, aren't like that. They're either pleasant or you're in trouble. The if I didn't bring anything off the ranges, I didn't bring any photographs, any documents, any material. I came off only with my memories. There was nothing to debrief me on. The alien mothers, remember, are very proud of their ability to raise their children. If anything I did was classified, that would mean, for example, that after the teacher brought her daughter and her daughter's playmates around to simply play, then I would have had to have been called in and be debriefed by CIA guards. That would have upset the teacher beyond limit. To have two ordinary human guards call me in and start asking questions. How does the teacher take care of her children? Do you think she's doing a good job? You wouldn't have had to tell her. The next time I went out there using their communication equipment, she would have just said, she would have just figured it right out. Or the next time the generals showed up, she would have just figured it right out. Well, remember the experience of that CIA guard on the steps of that he related to me on the steps of the Capitol building. The idea of upsetting the teacher, she was perfectly willing to just jerk the weapon and say, who's giving the orders? I thought we had an agreement, The committee had agreed, which included the teacher, Range 4 Harry, some of the other tall whites, as well as the American generals. They had agreed that nothing I did would ever be classified. And the tall whites expect their agreements to be carried out, just like Philadelphia lawyers, to the letter. They go through a lot of trouble. They are very conscious of their agreements, and they keep them to the letter. And they expect the same from humans. 40 years isn't much time for the tall whites, since they live so much longer than we do. If anything I did was classified, they agreed that nothing I did would ever be classified. They meant that period, and they meant the American generals to keep that period. And after all, I don't have any drawings or pictures. I didn't, the log books that were out there, I left out there. There were, usually classification refers to material things, drawings, material, whatever. When I was out there, I never observed the aliens to do anything magical. They were very good at building craft that traveled faster than the speed of light. They did not travel in time. I never observed them traveling to another dimension. I never saw, they're not angels, they're just creatures like us. But I'm very religious, I'm Roman Catholic, that angels are angels and aliens are aliens. They did not,
right.
They did not come to teach me anything. They came for their purposes. They didn't, currently it seems to me that American physics is kind of in the reverse Galileo position. In the time of Galileo, religious leaders required that scientists think inside the box, and scientists like Galileo wanted to experiment and think outside the box. Now, however, the situation appears to be reversed. American physicists seem to think that Einstein was always and forever perfect and complete, and so American scientists keep thinking inside the box. In Hall photon theory, my belief is that inside the photon, there is a third field, currently the box says there's only two fields. Most scientists won't consider it. They're insisting on thinking inside the box for religious reasons, pretending it's science, you see.
Right.
As I describe in the appendix of Book 3, I show in a scientific manner how scientists should be approaching that. Currently, it's the religious leaders who are willing to consider guys like Monsignor Balducci, I believe, and so on, who are willing to think outside the box and say, of course there can be intelligent life on other planets. One of the biggest shocks that I had to overcome in 1965 and 66 was once I realized that they were real, they were here, and that Einstein was wrong, and that God created life on many, similar to us, on a whole bunch of different planets. It was the shock of realizing that so many people had been so wrong for so long. You know, I mean, once you saw their craft come in, defeated, floating on the gravity field in perfect silence and landing, it was the shock of saying, it was the shock of saying, how could so many American scientists not have discovered that, or not even be trying to discover it, not even be thinking about that? Yeah, and likewise, from a religious point of view, it seems the teacher herself, one time on a different night, when I went over there and I was talking to her, and she was willing to answer a few questions. She was teasing me because they have a dry sense of humor, and they liked to outthink me, and they could do so very quickly or very easily. And she said, and I was saying, she was making a long story short. She was pointing up to the stars in the sky, and she said, "You can see all the stars in the sky. Surely you didn't think you were alone." And at the time, I had.
What?
And then they were all laughing. Surely you didn't think that whatever life was on the Earth wouldn't be repeated on the other stars. And I had. And then they were all laughing. Boy, is he silly. And it just seems so obvious to me when you go out at night and you look up at the stars of the sky that however life arose, whatever God did to make life here on Earth, he must have done it again because there are so many stars in the universe and it's so vast. And religious leaders are willing to think outside the box. Whereas now when I go and I talk to the scientists and stuff, they all start with this box called Einstein. Einstein himself never claimed to be perfect and complete, but all of his followers seem to claim that he was perfect and complete. And I think that's one of my observations is that
You want to
box.
pause real quick?
Yep.
I mean, I think the comment that he made, I think, holds heavy weight. It's very obvious that religion holds a strong grasp of control throughout our society, whether you believe in it or not. And I think it's a strong means of control. And I think strategically, it was very, very smart of the higher powers of the religion to own that statement before it became public and obvious. And I think that was a strategic move on the chessboard for the religion, because then once it does become stated, hey, we're not alone, religion, the religious leader owned up to it before it happened, so that way they can still hold their control that they have of the mass majority.
Yeah,
Agreed.
I mean, I think in some ways, and in certain religions, admitting that there is other life forms off of our planet would help in those religious aspects because, like, take Christianity just for example. Now the Garden of Eden is a whole planet. It's a paradise.
Right.
We passed away from it, and now we have to live here on Earth. So that reinforces that concept.
Well, and the other thing that's really crazy about it too is, it's when you jump into other religions, and other cultures, we look like idiots for being so short-minded. You go over to India, you know what I mean? They're like, fuck, how could I couldn't even own a job, trying to make people believe that there's other races out there. Like, that's, that's not even a thought process. Like, duh. I remember I mean, I got a couple of friends, older guys, but we fell into the same circle for one reason or another from Bangladesh. And I remember just sitting with them one day, and we're drinking, we're having a good time, hanging out, and we're out in the driveway just smoking some cigarettes. And I was, we're kind of on the topic, and I'm like, what do you guys think about aliens? And they right away they're just like, of course they're out there. Mathematically, it's impossible for them to not be. I mean, that was pretty. Like, he just killed off my whole conversation starter by just being like, "Look, mathematically, it's stupid to even think that there's not anything else." So, next subject, let's keep moving. And it's just kind of like, yeah, like I respect that answer, but it
Let's
blows
make it
my
fun.
mind.
Let's talk about it. Don't just shoot it down instantly with reality, because we all do know. We know this shit's real. We don't want to admit to it, man. We're scared because
Yeah,
we don't understand what's happening, because we've been
yep,
lied to. Now all of a sudden there's superior fucking knowledge, superior intellect and abilities to do shit, and we've had this kind of information for how long? Dude, that's upsetting and
yep,
disappointing. It makes people scared.
yep.
Oh yeah.
I mean, unfortunately, all that ties back into a whole bunch of stuff that's for a whole nother video. But just to like slap onto it a little bit, it's money, power, and control. You know what I mean? It,
Yep,
it
yep.
sucks that our society is controlled by that instead of being more open minded and what I'm saying, just doing things for the better purpose. We have at
Oh,
this time and at this time in our society, if we would have built the base of our society on a different platform, we would have no need for money at all. It would have no purpose. I wouldn't have to worry about the gas prices going up. I wouldn't have to worry about my electricity bill because there's 3 TVs running right now. 5 of my rooms have their lights on, and whatever else is fucking burning a hole in my pocket. Like, none of that would be a thought process because we'd be, as a society, solely working on just trying to better society, to better our species, to move forward and become a multi-planet, you know, species ourselves.
Yeah,
And I mean,
man.
a lot of that also falls into way back when, where we decided to lean on religious beliefs instead of science. I mean, science was a sign of witchcraft for how long before we started to grow up and put our big boy panties on and say, hey, no, this is a thing,
Right.
and that person's not a witch that needs to be burned at the stake. I mean, it goes and goes and goes, but that's just just a little kind of splash of where this all comes from if you really want to try and wrap your mind around it and make your brain explode.
oh,
Yeah,
definitely. Then
it's
we
the
also
macro.
have to think about the whole process of, in the past 70 years, science has stagnated out again. Like, it's gotten really stale. Like, there's nothing. They're not producing new. Like, here in the
You
Well,
know
last
why?
year.
that's only to the mass public. Let's
Yeah,
put
well,
that
but
pin in
but
that.
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
also a little truth to that, because this is where science and what used to be, okay, what we call religion now has been based in fear and rules. Once upon a time, the belief in God and the belief that God was inside of me, just like it is inside of you, used to be called philosophy.
Yeah,
And philosophy and science were really a part of this. So when we get spirituality just as a whole, as in, believe in love and light and the possibility that everything could possibly even exist, don't count it out, versus religion ruling science. Once we get philosophy and the higher power together with science, we would start creating abundantly.
yeah. And if you really want to, like, kind of dig and play, I mean, a lot of what I think the real teachings were was, trying to teach us that we are each individually in control of our own universes. You know what I mean? I have my own universe. I have my planets that circle me as me being the sun are the people that are around me. No different than Oz or you. You know what I mean? And then we let our universes collide and become
Yep.
part of one another by choice, or fate,
Yep.
or however it plays out. Like I'm glad to, have you as a neighbor of my solar system, just meeting you here in the last few months. But it's, and even like, some of the talks of, you know, like the power of hallucinogens and how that can, expand your mind and open up your mind to a more spiritual belief or however you want to play that out. I mean, there's just so much more that's behind the curtains that are closed in front of us. I guess is really what I want to get at is a basic kind of wrap it up.
I like that.
Yep, I'll agree with that, man. That's good stuff, baby. Yeah. How vibing?
We got about 6 minutes left of this, so let's finish this off, and then we can do a little break. And then, like I said, I sent you that little 8-minute episode that just kind of be a simple open up the door thing for some of our other videos that we're doing, because I think we're probably covering some other different species as well. This is a great video, though.
Remember when the teacher said,
Yeah, we'll get right into that.
That on other planets, the intelligent beings typically killed off the animals.
No one tells stories better than Audible, the home of
You
storytelling.
fucking bastard.
For motivation and
Planets, the intelligent beings typically killed off the animals. She was referring to other planets they'd seen with intelligent life on them, but she didn't elaborate. And the reason is because when they came for their purposes. They didn't come to say, let me tell Charlie everything there is to know about the universe. They didn't care. If they didn't have anything to say, some nights they might just come, not say anything. The kids might play and they might leave. Especially the men. If there was no reason for them to actually come and talk when they were close, like that night when there were the 3 electrical engineers there. They wanted to see me start up the electrical generator because that's the same kind of power source the U.S. Air Force had given them for use up on their hangar because it was built by the Air Force. And they wanted to see how I used it as part of their training program. See? Well, from their point of view, there's no reason to talk to me about it. They just want to see me do it. So they came and just stood there and watched. And then, eventually Charlie's bright enough to figure out that I should just carry on with my duties. And they would just stand and watch. And then, if there had been a reason for them to say, what does this do? Then they would have said, what does that do? But they didn't come and say, oh, let me tell you about this star, or let me tell you about that star, or anything like that. One of the things I had to do is put aside the baggage of Hollywood. We all know how Hollywood thinks things are supposed to go. According to Hollywood, when aliens come, there's supposed to be lights in the sky, and they're supposed to be pretty colored and move fast and have clever formations, and then they're supposed to land over there, and somebody's supposed to come out and do
Right.
things. I really wasn't ready in the 60s for the idea that I would just walk around the corner of one of my weather shack, and there would be a man standing there. The day I did at Range 1, and he wasn't human. And he was just standing there looking at me, and what he was doing is guarding the play area where the teacher and the children were playing. And you hadn't seen the craft, you hadn't seen the scout craft, you hadn't seen him come, you hadn't seen him leave. There was no reason for him to say anything because there's no reason for you to know what he's doing there. He's just guarding the entrance to where the kids and the teacher are playing on that day. And if you feel like standing there and looking at him, well, that's fine with him. If you feel like running away, that's fine with him. Because he's not human, he sees it differently, and it took me he's not human, he sees it differently, and it took me a while. It took me a very long time, several weeks, to get used to the idea that they are the way that they are that way because they like themselves being that way, and that's different than the way Hollywood would have us think they were. And
Right.
of course, one of the biggest shocks is they were so similar to us in so many ways. They love their children. They have a dry sense of humor. They love to tell jokes and laugh, and they get bored out of their gourd up in the base. One of the common things to talk about with the young, tall white women was fashions. The Air Force provided them with clothes straight out of the Sears catalog. One of the jokes the teacher used to make about the Air Force generals is up on their base in their commissary, there were some clothes that the generals had picked that they could choose from. And of course, the teacher used to say, well, all the American generals are all old men, so naturally they have no fashion sense, right? And she used to laugh about the fashions that the generals thought they should wear, you see. And one of the things that she and the other young, tall white women wanted to do was to go into town and buy pretty clothes. And of course, we don't think of aliens that way. But when in my weather shack, I used to have a Sears catalog, a Montgomery Ward's catalog, a J.P. Penney's catalog. We had outdoor plumbing, and so I had several copies of the catalogs for several reasons. And one of the things that the young tall white women used to like to do is to come through and look through my catalogs. And what they'd be looking at are women's clothes. Sometimes when you'd see them out in the desert, or especially on the morning, what they'd be wearing were clearly clothes straight out of the Sears catalog or the Montgomery Ward's catalog, and they were very, they were as proud of the new clothes as any Earth woman would be. The teacher was very proud of her ability to dress up and look like a nurse, and it took me a long time to get over the baggage from Hollywood, because every time you look at a Hollywood movie, aliens are supposed to be weird and different. Yeah, and I really, it took me. It was such a shock to have like the teacher walk in with, wearing a new dress that she had bought from Sears and proudly show it off and say, "What do you think of my dress?" Yeah.
That's cool.
All right. All right. Thank you, Charles Hall, for sharing that with you. Now, I actually have read one of his books, and basically, it's what he just went over tonight. But in one of his books, he sets himself up as a weather station maintenance guy who then meets like this odd family and befriends them and stuff, but they never get too close to him. And then like at the end, there's an incident and one of the kids died or something. It was weird. It was really weird. That's what I remember from reading material about what this guy was talking about.
Well, I would
So
just
it
like to
was
say this was a good grab or a good find. I'm glad you put this on my radar. Let
Yep.
alone, I hope that the listeners feel the same way. So good job
Right.
on that, Web C. I didn't have as much time as I would like to have to dig up some stuff. So
I spent
definitely,
all day looking for this thing, man. Like,
this was a good win in my book, man. Good find.
yep.
Good find.
And
Sure.
yeah, I was. It's really interesting to hear the humanizing side about these, different types of aliens that we're interested in learning about and stuff, and having a more humanized side instead of a militaristic side of intelligence coming our way is definitely a much more pleasant way to end the story or to
Yep.
even dive into this type of a topic. It's really great. So thanks
One thing
to
that I wanted
everybody
to
for
point.
coming out and watching tonight.
Well,
We got
we
some
got
more stuff coming. Leprechaun sent me a video. We're gonna Josh on for a little bit. Let's see how that goes. Which one
Yeah,
did
but
you send it to?
this video is this is kind of a little base. So we're talking about the fact that there are multiple species out there. So it's just kind of a door opener. As we cover other things too.
Right.
Yep. Cool. I'm just gonna get this rolling.
When you hear the word alien, what do you picture in your head? Are they short or tall, green or gray? And when you hear the word alien, what do you picture in your head? Are they short or tall, green or gray? And what key features do they have? If people who claim to have actually met aliens are to be believed, then there are certainly good and bad kinds out there, but also many different types. So you need to know how to distinguish between them. This is Unveiled, and today we're taking a closer look at the different types of alien you should know about.
Oh boy.
Do you need the big questions
59
answered?
different
Are you
species.
constantly curious? Then why not subscribe to Unveiled for more clips like this one, and ring the bell for more thought-provoking content. Scientifically speaking, no one truly knows what aliens are going to look like, and any version of life that develops on other planets could well be drastically different from our own. With just a sample of one to build from, life on Earth, it's difficult to calculate or even predict what the rest of space could have in store, besides presumably infinite variety. However, there are those on Earth who claim to have already seen aliens, sometimes via an alien abduction. Survivors of these encounters have differing stories, but the most common themes include scientific experiments, invasive probing, and the taking of samples, sometimes via quite intimate means. While the overall narratives often overlap, however, what an alien physically looks like can vary. There apparently are different types to contend with, and with some surprises. For example, although the image of little green men has long been popular in society and science fiction, genuinely reported abduction cases rarely include such a creature.
So these dudes right here, my current report on these guys are that they are the non-player characters. They are one mission type of thing. They're good for one mission. They go out, they do that mission, and then they become bio blobs. They just disintegrate back into biomass, is what's been said. Which kind of like falls in line with everything that kind of happens with them. So I think their first missions, when they first started coming to Earth, their first missions were to make it to Earth, and they would crash their ship, and then after crashing their ship, we would find them just before they would turn into a biomass, look at them, and then it would just become crap to look at. Like it wouldn't be easy to look at. So this is my report currently on these two little dudes that they got on the screen right now.
Other alien kinds are much more common in sightings. The Greys are by far the most popular depiction among those claiming to have met with aliens in real life. They're described as having a generally humanoid composition and sharing certain characteristics with us, although they're often shorter, have larger heads, bigger, darker eyes, and a distinctly gray skin tone. This particular alien won't be unfamiliar to you. The Greys are still today sci-fi favorites and something of a worldwide phenomenon. Going from most abduction accounts, they don't usually speak as such, but instead communicate telepathically from their minds to yours. The Greys aren't usually overly hostile, but they're not averse to causing an abductee pain either, so long as they get the information they want. Similarly, the Greys are said to be extremely intelligent but lacking emotion. So even if they're not ill-meaning, they are ruthless. As such, abductees claim that the Greys will probe and take samples, seemingly in order to create hybrids. And their rise to become perhaps the archetype for what an alien should look like, at least during the 20th century, can be traced back to one of the most infamous abduction stories in history, that of Betty and Barney Hill in 1961. While it was the Greys, too, who were supposedly at the center of the Roswell crash in 1947. According to a map remembered by Betty Hill, a map she claims to have seen as a projection inside an unknown alien ship. Her Greys, at least, came from the far-off binary star system of Zeta Reticuli. If true, they've traveled many, many light years to become humankind's Alien 101. Another version of ETs, though, is much more animalistic to our eyes. Rather than smooth all over like the Greys, they could be scaly, armored, and less humanoid. They're variously known as the Archons, Saurians, or Draconians. And while descriptions differ in science fiction and in claimed real-world encounters, these beings are generally said to be a few feet taller than us. Again, the stories of them do differ, but they're usually said to be ancient and far longer lived than we are. It's said that they walked the surface of Earth thousands, perhaps millions of years before humanity did, but were in fact forced underground by the arrival of another type of alien in our planet's distant past called the Anunnaki. In some retellings, the Anunnaki are closer to God than alien, and are alleged to have hit from the lost planet Nibiru. But whatever they were, they allegedly triggered these previous aliens to retreat in a large, complex, and until now undiscovered cave system far below the Earth's crust. Of course, until now there is no real-world evidence of any such thing, and indeed it's a general idea that has gone on to fuel many a modern and dangerous conspiracy theory. However, some have also drawn comparison between these alternate aliens and the revered gods of ancient times. The Egyptians, for example, worshipped a god called Sobek that possessed a humanoid figure but the head of an alligator, while similar animal-human entities appear across other belief systems too. Rumors of such creatures in the here and now could also relate to various claimed sightings of straight-up monsters all over the world map.
No!
I am so excited to show you what we've been working on for the last 4 years.
All over the world map. In one case, there's the legend of the lizard man of Scape Ore Swamp in South Carolina, who's said to target unsuspecting passers-by, and in particular, stranded cars and their drivers. But finally, and while the invading Greys and Saurians perhaps should be easy to spot in the open, so-called Nordic aliens probably wouldn't be. In fact, a defining characteristic of them is that they should seamlessly blend with humankind, because they're an extremely close physical match for us. In some cases, they're described as resembling the Norse gods, like Thor, who himself might be considered a Nordic alien were he to ever appear on our planet. Further Norse variations include the Plejarans, which are said to have originated in a bright and bursting star cluster known as the Pleiades. While other alien types, humanoid or not, are generally painted as having a clearly frightening or unique appearance, Nordics are much subtler, which in itself perhaps makes them a little scarier, although they're widely said to be benevolent and good rather than evil. Like the Greys, Nordic aliens are said to heavily rely on psychic energy. They communicate telepathically and can also live for thousands of years or more. Again, then, they're presented as beings of infinite wisdom compared to humans. They're also at times linked with or crossed over with so-called Venusian aliens, said to come from Venus with startling beauty. It's as though, when they appear in alien encounter stories, Nordic and Venusian aliens are a reflection of humankind, usually at its best. And some versions of alien lore suggest that the Nordics do cross paths with the Greys. Here, the Greys are emotionless but efficient, while Nordic aliens are emotionally astute and much more cognitively complex, which is another reason why this type of alien, if it is out there, would be difficult to spot. Nordics wouldn't struggle with anything about the human way of life. In fact, they'd probably be better at it than even we are. Of course, the rich diversity of reported alien history, this still isn't all there is. Other, rarer and lesser-known alien varieties allegedly include a race known as the Arcturians. These are perhaps the ET type that is closest to the little green men stereotype, said to stand around 5 feet tall, with big ancient eyes and green skin. Another more obscure reported variety is the avians, a bird-like species, often with bluish color, that features in some much contested retellings of how the pyramids were built. Thankfully, both the Arcturians and the avians are generally said to be kind and to come in peace, and often, allegedly, to help us lowly humans reach some kind of spiritual awakening. But what's your verdict? We know that alien abduction stories are becoming commonplace in the modern day. The skepticism that surrounds them perhaps isn't likely to disappear until an alien presence on Earth is officially recognized the world over. But until then, we have mounting descriptions to add color, texture, mood, and motivation to our ever-growing and shared mental image of what these things might be. Because those are the different types of aliens that you should know about. What do you think? Is there anything we missed? Let us know.
Yeah, there's some stuff you missed.
Oh yeah, lots of it, but hey, we're getting there.
Got to fill in the blanks here and there, right?
Interesting. That's why we pursue knowledge. We gotta link it all together. It doesn't all come from one source. It comes from all of us. It comes from within. If you got questions, man, try to look within, because you can't find anything within without. That's the way it says in the Bible, even as within, as without, as above, so below.
Yeah, no, I think, yeah.
So I just want to show you something real quick.
It's a huge factor for your own perception of reality, meeting.
So this is that star map I was talking about earlier. And in the star map, like, it's lined out. Like, it tells you who everybody is, where they are in relation to us, where they put Earth in the middle. So Earth is in the center there. And then, like, they explain, like, they say, like, reptilians are now on Rigel, originally the Nordics, before the Procyon exodus. So then the Nordics went to Procyon after they left Rigel, but they were originally from Rigel. And then they made it to Procyon. And when they went to Procyon, a branch of them divided off and went down to Sirius A and B. And that's where the Nordics came into contact with the mermaid people, or the mermaid species of hominoids. So it's just crazy. But anyways, in this video, we'll go into this video another day once we've covered more of the actual species and stuff. But yeah, that's just a really good, like, to show you guys that image.
That's really cool. Yeah.
I'm away from my phone at the moment. Sorry. Walking very slowly.
So yeah, there's just a whole bunch of stuff. But they brought up in this map, they talk about there's like bad aliens too. So on this map, there's the reptilians, and then there's the tarantulians, or the tarantula people, bug people,
Right.
basically. And apparently, the bug people are not nice.
No, that's why they created the movie Starship Troopers.
Yeah, I think that's I thought Starship Troopers was not far fetched at all. I thought that was like right on the money.
Yeah.
Look at praying mantises, man. Just take a look at that and let that shit sink in. No, don't even think for a second.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't think enough people really realize and understand how strong tarantulas are. Like,
right.
You know, like
body mass to weight ratio.
It's not hard to go onto YouTube and look up a video of like a lizard or an iguana trying to like eat a tarantula, and that thing will straight up like grab its mouth, open its mouth off, and just start chewing away at the thing. Like, nah, I'm not your snack, you're mine. Let's try again.
Right.
Yeah, the bug species in general are freaking crazy.
We're lucky they're as small as they are.
This is that complex where I was trying to explain the idea of what it is to be why we're very special, and why there's only very certain animals that are closely regarded to be intelligent like us, because we can make these decisions. Insects don't really have that type of cortex in the brain to process emotion. They are a very instinctual species, period. It's live or die. That's it.
And I think it's very reasonable to think that if we have that type of diversity just on our one singular planet, what the heck else could be out there in the masses of the universe that are going to be completely different than anything that we could ever expect, assume, or anticipate?
Exactly, yeah. And we're still discovering new species or whatever the case may be. Yeah, we are not alone. God, look at all the like different people. Look at all the different. Yeah, you said it. Animals, insects, bro. We got a big world to explore.
Yeah, I'm excited for the next couple generations. I think that we're not going to see as much in our lifetime as I'm curious to see, but I think in the generations to come here very soon, there's going to be a lot of wowing and jaw-dropping moments that our children and our children's children are going to get to see, praying that we can get past the hurdles of what's going on now in the world.
And so what we're talking about is having found that there's a reset switch in the body to be young again, and the information in the body to be young is still there. So theoretically, you could take someone who's 100 years old and reset their body to be young again. Now, the exciting thing is we've been doing clinical trials, or preclinical trials, and there's no apparent downside to this yet. Oh my God. Isn't that great? That's incredible. And we're now testing in non-human primates just to see if it's safe. Oh my gosh. And if all goes well, in the next 2 years, we'll hopefully cure blindness in people. That is absolutely freaking incredible. That's absolutely bananas. But it gets better. Okay. The eye was just something we chose. I didn't think it would work any better in the eye. In fact, I thought it'd probably work worse. But we found that there's a universal reset switch. So you can reset different parts of the body. You can reset skin, which you can reset muscle. You can reset, what have we done? The skin was easy. So using the same genes. So we're just basically turning on an embryonic program in older people or middle-aged in their cells and in mice, and they get young again. What does this mean? This means one day it's going to be possible to reset the age of the body. We've done that. We've done that in mice. Now the question is, how soon can we get it into ourselves? We could reset the age of a complex tissue. We chose the mouse's eye. We let...
Yeah, I didn't want to scare you or anything, but this is the second scientist that has accomplished this.
Yes, and that's absolutely terrifying.
You're right.
I mean, in some medical fields, sure, this could be a breakthrough, but for me, the biggest problem is the people that are going to be able to get their hands on it without even trying are not the people that I want to have their hands on it. I mean, that's
Exactly.
Oh yeah,
that's
you
what
know
absolutely terrifies me with this. If we weren't a greedy, money, power hungry, society, I would
well,
be super jumping with joy and be excited about this. But the fact that it's going to be used on the wrong people for the wrong reasons
my
makes
biggest thing
me.
is once we no longer have a limited time here on Earth, then money kind of loses its value to us, anyways.
No, it
Right.
doesn't. Not if
I
the
think
right
it
people
does.
are not if the right people are holding the power. I mean, it's no different
Well,
than
it's true.
it's no different than right now. We have
Right.
no
That's what they're
need
doing.
for
They're fooling us
fossil
about
fuel.
money.
We have no need for fossil fuel. We've we've had people die because they've come up with vehicles that can run off of water. You know what I mean? We've had people die because they've came up with energy sources that don't need to be paid for. They can be free flowing like radio waves.
Mhm.
I mean, no, there's no reason at all that it's make me believe that the extended length of life will get rid of money, because we could have got rid of money long ago, but the people that have the money in their pocket gives them the power, which gives them the control. They're not going to let that go. Why would they ever let that go? And we are in the palm of their hands, and all they got to do is squeeze to make us beg for a little bit of food to put on our family's plate.
One of those dudes just died, by the way. One of those old rich dudes. There's like 1% of 1% of 1%. His name's like George Soros. Yeah, he's fucking like he disappeared. He's gone. A couple days ago, they were like his GPS motorcade, like he was traveling and his motorcade went silent. GPS went silent. Apparently, 2 days later, they came out. His security came out and said he's dead or something. He not alive no more.
No
But he's
surprise
old.
there.
That dude was old. Like it wasn't like he died because somebody hurt him. He gone because he was just old. Money wasn't saving him, and that's the point I'm having is we're gonna get somewhere. But the hard part is the last 20 times humanity has tried to go that
Play God.
direction, it hasn't gone good for humanity. And
No,
that's the
can't play
biggest
God.
problem. That's the biggest problem is because humanity itself will find a way to power and greed.
Yep,
If you
can't
get
play
rid of
God.
money, the next thing that becomes power to you is control. And if you take away the facet of money and only have the control power aspect, then there's not that big of a change of hands then. Because with money you can cause changes of hands, but with dictatorship type powers, you can't cause that. Look at Kim Jong Un or whatever over in North Korea. He's going to be the ruler until he dies, and then his kid's going to rule, and then her kid's going to rule, and that's just the way they run their society over there. But it doesn't work because their people suffer.
Yeah.
So and they run on that whole society of less money, you don't need money, money's bad. That's their whole society in North Korea is you don't need money, we'll feed
Well,
you,
yeah, but
the
they
government
they
will take
control.
care of
Right,
you.
but that's a control of fear. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that
Yep.
fear is empowered by the money that he holds, and he
Mhm.
holds that money through his, whatever you want to label it. I mean, that's kind of what I'm getting at. That's what
Yeah.
I mean. I think at some point in time, money is going to have to disappear.
Yeah.
And it's inedible, but I think that the people who control the power right now, they're going to hold on to that for absolutely as long as necessary. And I think that it's going to take anything from, a global disaster to an awakening of the people and realizing that our numbers are greater than theirs. And, at some point in time, it's going to, it's going to get really ugly before it gets really pretty. And I
Mhm.
think that that's what scares most people, that realize what's going to be the awakening of that change is the sacrifices that are going to be made to do it. And again, we're being controlled by fear. So, I mean, it's this really big, ugly loop in my eyes on,
Yeah.
us getting to where we need to be versus where we are.
Yeah, it's that giant cycle, man. It's a giant cycle. And when we realize money's the problem, then we start taking that away, and then we realize, oh, this is now a problem, and then just circles us back into the loop. Because think of it, when we go back away from money, we could do trade and barter like we originally did, which was the first system of money humanity used. But trade and barter then becomes a greed system too, because no, I want 35 pelts for my grain and not 20, So then you got to be that guy that go out there and take 25, take more resources to make the guy with the grain happy to get the grain. And so that whole concept, like it's like it got put into a humanity in a way that like we can't get it out of our heads for some reason is what it is. It's because
I've thought about I've thought about the idea of utopia since a really young age. I always liked the idea of utopia, and I've pondered it so many different times, and it it really comes down to how do you create a structure of utopia without still having an overhead like kind of mastermind pulling the strings to make it function properly.
it's
And
so hard.
even if you took the humanity or the person away from being that and you make it an AI, well, it's still an AI controlling the masses to live in what is considered a peaceful
Right,
state.
right.
It's still it's really difficult, and
Yep.
it's yeah, it's there's I don't know, there's to get back to though kind of like talking about the powers and the money and this and that, the best the best explanation that I like to use to give to people to help them understand, we'll bring it down a notch from instead of just to make it a smaller picture for somebody. Instead of thinking about it as a government or a united power throughout the world, let's just bring it down to people like you or me versus a family that comes from wealth. So let's start right there. Look at what they're doing and what they've been doing for hundreds, sometimes even many hundreds of years to hold that wealth within that family. They've been playing chess for all of those years.
Mhm.
We aren't even pawns. We're not even on the board, and they're not on the board either, is what's the scariest part. Because if you really want to compare it to a chessboard, they're the people playing the chessboard. They're moving around pieces. They're not even on the board for us to touch and knock off. That's how scary and how big it is, and
Yeah.
how much I want you to understand. Like when you're talking about the placement of power, the placement of money, and how it all gets tossed around, we're not even they're aliens
No.
compared to us when it comes to the knowledge of how to play the game, because they're the ones writing the laws and making the rules to people to move the money around the way they can, and we don't even know how the game is played. They ain't even read the rules to us yet. We're trying to play a game without a rule book. That's how
Yeah.
sick and twisted it really is for
Uh-huh.
people that don't
Yeah.
get it, don't understand it, and have a closed mind to it.
Yeah. No, I totally understand where you're coming from. That's the me and you
Nailed
feel that way. We look at it that way. That is my analogy for that concept. I call it um crossing the bridge. We were the kids that never got to cross the bridge to the other side and see how they flourished. We always had to wonder what it was like from our side of the bridge to see that side, because we can see it, man. We can see it, but there's nobody. There's no nothing that's saying, "Hey, you can cross the bridge now." There's
Right.
nothing there saying that, doing that, and you're right. And that's my analogy for it. Is no, there's no crossing the bridge there. I mean, there's
Right.
people have written music about it. People talk about it throughout history. Civilizations have fallen and risen due to the whole dichotomy of the young and or the restless masses getting tired of dealing with the single individuals in power. When that queen said, "Let them eat cake," man, they took that lady's head. You know what I'm saying? Like that's the whole point. Is like, yes, we will eventually realize that as people, we are greater in numbers against those people, but then we just fall back into that for some weird reason. I know there's like something programmed into us, and this is where I think the aliens did it, and where it all ties in is I think the aliens pre-programmed our genetics to want to strive for money
Well,
in a
and
certain
like
way.
when when you talk about some of the beliefs or conspiracies or whatever you want to call them about aliens, one of the things that always kind of triggered me a little bit is, you know, we re- we are a species that I feel like, and I could be wrong. Maybe there's a psychiatrist or something that would completely disagree with what I'm saying or about to say, but I believe that we mimic what we've seen. You know what I mean? We're mimickers of what we've learned, and I bring this up because, you know, especially being white in America and growing up throughout elementary school and starting to learn about slavery, my first thought process right away is, well, where did this come from? Where were we taught this? How was this trained to us? Because then you start looking back and you look back at it being talked about in Egypt, talking about it, down in some of the upper areas of Africa, and it being a very talked about thing, and where'd that come from? And if you look at some of the conspiracies where they talk about, aliens, speeding up our evolution or hybriding us or whatever, it a lot of times it falls back on it being because they needed some workers, and so that's where it kind of originated was, and then we just mimic that, and that's why when they went away or faded away or whatever happened, the people that were able to still kind of take the reins and be leaders, then we're just like, well, let me mimic that because I can keep having these people work for me so that I can hold this power and hold this throne, and I don't got to do anything, and I can eat the the fruits of the garden while they scavenge from my trash can,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
it's just a repeating concept, and it's
We
I
can
bring
we
I
can
bring
see.
this up
Yeah.
because even though we've in America we've gotten rid of slavery, that's an illusion and that's a lie. We haven't gotten rid of
Right.
slavery. What we've done is we've made it so that people are given the illusion that there's free, but within these guidelines that we call as laws and rules. And
Mm-hmm.
so I mean, I right now I can't quit my job. I can't walk away and say I don't want to be a part of this system anymore because I'm just a little tiny little ant working to do some little part of this bigger picture because the system won't allow me to. If I go and I build a cabin in the middle of nowhere and I create a rain catcher and I'm creating my own energy and I'm off the grid, somebody's going to come and find me and tell me that's wrong and I'm breaking the laws and I'm breaking the rules. And they're going to say I have to get back on the grid and I have to be a part of their pay scale. Otherwise, I'm doing something illegal and I can get put in jail for it. I'm not allowed to feed my family without playing the game with the big card holders.
No, this is all true. This is all I understand. This I watch videos daily with people talking about how they're having interference with the government due to them choosing to not want to live a life incorporated into society. And yeah, you're right. And I for a long time have wanted to be one of those people to just run away and not be a member of society and just go
Before I
chop
had
my
kids,
wood and
before I had
hunt
kids,
my
I thought about it very
yeah.
deeply.
Yeah.
Bringing the kids into the picture changes the whole ballgame.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
Makes it
bringing
harder.
kids into the picture definitely changes the way you exercise certain rights that you choose to have or not have throughout your life. Like and yeah, man. Because then they use the child against you
Well,
so much.
even just talking about the child, it's like, this is, a little bit off subject, but just to kind of show that, means of control within the system. I mean, it's not illegal to not send your kid through education. But if you don't give that kid the structured education, they may not be able to get certain jobs because they don't have the government education.
Hmm?
And
Yeah,
it's a silly thought process. You know what I
yeah.
mean? So I don't have to put my kid through education, but if my kid doesn't have the education that you're providing, which is mostly bullshit, my kid can't go out and work a regular job and get a regular life. I mean, heck, if you want to talk about, one of the, higher powered billionaires that are out and about and a lot of hype around right now. I mean, Elon Musk has straight out said on multiple channels and interviews that I've watched, he's like, you don't need to have an education to make money. You don't need to go to college. You don't need any of that to make money. The system's not built to where that's what you need to make money, but that's what we're led to believe.
Yeah.
That's
Well, it's
that's
like
the lie we're given.
all those colleges are teaching are teaching people about the greatness of people who never went to college. The great things that people who never went to college, those people, because they weren't programmed, had their minds set free and they were allowed to freely think. And those people, the people I'm talking about, Isaac Newton, John Adams, like Thomas Edison, those dudes didn't go to college, man. College wasn't a thing. Like, for these dudes, it wasn't the option. It was either you figure it out and do the job, or you go find something else to fucking do, because that's what the world. That's the way the world was working for them at that time.
What I think the saddest part of the educational system, it's not even what they're teaching, but it's how they're teaching it. I mean, because I think all the three of us can very easily agree that there's not one right answer. You don't have to do it by yourself. And these are all things that you're taught. Don't cheat. Don't look at his question. Figure it out on your own. Study on your own. That's all bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
If I want to succeed in life, or if I have a hurdle I'm trying to get over, the last thing I'm doing is sitting in a room by myself pondering how I'm going to jump over that hurdle. The first
Yeah.
thing I'm doing is I'm calling you, or I'm calling one of my other close friends, and I'm like, hey, I got this hurdle. I got to get over it. What are my options? And I'm talking about it as a group with my peers, with my family members, and saying, let's do this.
Yep.
Let's do this together. Let's get past it. Not I'm going to do it by myself. I only need myself. I can figure it out on my own, but why would I make it that hard for myself when it's so much easier to step outside that box that's being put around us? I mean, and we
Mhm.
started off talking about this conversation, this show, when you stepped away, I mean, one of the biggest things that I feel like our school shuts down in these kids' minds is their creativity. And that's
Mhm.
absolutely the worst thing that you can do to a person, but the best thing you can do to a person if you want to control them.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, you know, I'm I'm working on raising the two kids that I got in the house, um, with the mentality of leadership. And I've
Absolutely.
had to tell them, you know, yeah, I'm raising you to be a leader, but you need to learn to follow first.
Well,
You know, that's
the big thing I teach Autumn, because you know her as well as I do, she has natural born leader instincts, but as of right now, she leads because she wants other people to do the things that she wants. And that's
hmm
the big hurdle I have to get her past is if you want to be a leader, you need to be leading because you want to be able to reach other people's goals, not your own. That's why you lead.
yeah,
You lead to
yep,
get other people to their destination, not to get other people to your destination.
yep.
That's the wrong way of leading.
That's the that's why I tell Dustin and Caden both, you got to learn to follow too.
Yep.
Because you're following somebody else's ideas sometimes, and whether you like it or not, you got to learn to follow that idea so that you can get past and in front of that idea and then show your idea. And once it's appropriate for you to show your idea and stuff. And yeah, it's a really hard world, because half the time what they're telling you to do in school, what you have those meetings with your teacher, oh, your kid doesn't behave, your kid doesn't sit down, your kid talks too much. Well, it's like, you know what, I'd rather my kid talk too much. I'd rather my kid be the one standing up and not being a disruptor to class, but being like, hey, I don't agree with you, type
Mhm.
of a thing. If my kid's being that way, that's good. That's good
Yeah.
there. Now you got to work harder to prove to my kid that that's the way things are,
Yeah.
you know?
One of the conversations I actually had to have this conversation with my middle child today with Hayden, and it was brought to my attention that she got in trouble at school a couple of times this week, and that's out of character for her. She's a caring, very smart, very catches on very fast, and wants to show it. You know what I mean? It's part of that. I think is that kind of lack of confidence where she wants the teacher to see that she's catching on and she knows because she wants that reassurance that she's doing good, which I
Mm-hmm.
understand. But so when I asked her about her acting out and getting into trouble, what she told me is that she, got really frustrated in class because she wasn't being given the opportunity to answer the questions. And I said, I understand that, but you have, 20 so kids in your class. All 20 of those kids also want that. And a good I've already went to her last teacher conference was phenomenal. I mean, her teacher's face was lit up the whole time, just talking about how proud she was of how incredible she's been in class. And so I should have told her, I said, one of the reasons is the teacher probably already knows that you do know the answer. You are ahead of the game. She wants to see some of the other kids that she's not sure about. She wants to see where their level's at. Plus, those other kids deserve just as much a chance to answer that question as you. So that means if every kid's given one chance, you have a 1 in 20 questions opportunity of answering that question. So that means for every one question that you do get the answer, there should be 22 other questions that should be getting asked beforehand. So that means you have to hold a lot of patience within yourself to wait to be given your opportunity and understand that. And, I mean, I think it got to her a little bit, but, it's a lot for a 7-year-old to grasp that wants to show her, self succeeding to her superior, which is a teacher.
Oh yeah. I've had incidences like that where I was a kid and I got let down because I didn't get to do something I wanted to do in class or some shit like that. I know that feeling. And yeah, that's the example is it wasn't my turn. And that's a great example. It's just for some kids, they don't want to hear that it wasn't their turn.
No.
Like that's not the noise they're trying to get with. That's not on their positive vibe, So I get that, and so I can understand why kids get upset. Like Caden's biggest issue at school that we ever had was she needed speech therapy. And
I remember that. I remember.
She used to get so mad because they wouldn't give her the time of day to even let her enunciate to talk or anything.
Because
so it was just really hard. And man, so I had to go to school and mom had to go to school and we had to sit down with them and we had to talk with them. I told school, I was like, look, I had a lot of hard time. I had a really hard time in school with education, but my hard time was I was smarter than my group that I was placed in, and I was forced to stay in that group. They wouldn't let me accelerate.
Which is a lot of what Dustin has to deal with.
Yeah, that's a lot of what Dustin has to deal with, and I'm working on that with him. He's actually getting to the part of school where peer pressure is bothering him more.
It's going to be a big problem, especially with him becoming the age he is.
Yeah, he kind of got upset because they're making fun of him at school right now because he likes Minecraft still and plays a lot of Minecraft. And you know what I told Dustin?
Shit. Uncle Craig still plays Minecraft.
Yeah,
with Kiriana.
I told him.
I mean, that's a game filled about exercising creativity. So tell him that Uncle Craig said that's the one time you can give him the middle finger as long as the teacher doesn't see it.
That's what I told him. I said, put it to you this way, man. I said, I bet they're all those whiny little brats that play Fortnite. I was like, you should probably you should make fun of them for playing Fortnite and tell them to play a real man's game and get Call of Duty or Borderlands 3. And I was like, dude, you play so many other games. Don't let them think that you only play Minecraft. I was like, you can go to school and talk about Borderlands. You can go to school. I was like, just don't talk so much about the guns. Talk about the different characters on the game and their cool abilities and stuff like that. I was like, but you don't have, because, school, they're all like anti-gun and shit, so you bring up a video game and it's too gun heavy. So, but I just told them, I was like, think about that. I was like, they probably like a game that you don't play or don't care to play. And I was like, and I asked him, I was like, be honest now. I was like, do you try to brag about the things you have? I said, because me and mom give you things that a lot of kids don't get to have in life. And I want you to know that could cause a lot of kids to not want to be your friend if you talk, and be resentful towards you and stuff for it and stuff. And I was super honest about it. I was like, if you do that, they're going to probably make fun of you and be mean to you, dude.
They're going to find a way to alienate you. They don't want
or to bring you down to their level. And so that's where I led the conversation. So I was like, don't brag about the cool games you got. Just, say these are the games I like to play and move on about it. But I was like, nobody wants to, hear about your cool video game headset. Nobody wants to hear about, I was like, unless it's like your really good friend and you're trying to encourage him to figure out how to get one for himself, or some shit like that. But So that's what Dustin was having issues with in school, is that whole thing, which a couple like last year, 5th grade, it was I don't wear name brand clothes. Now, you know how I've always felt about name brand clothes. I care fucking less. I'll go shop at Walmart, Target, whatever's cheaper for the week. I'm not the guy that's got to wear a $500 pair of pants and a $600 shirt. I'm not that guy. My
I don't
kid,
even like shopping for clothes.
my kid.
If the jeans that I wear on a regular day basis, I bought probably 15 years ago. Like I don't like. Believe me, I did not buy this Adidas hat. This is Monica's. I just throw it on because it matches the shirt. I could care less about this Adidas symbol. Like name brand, yeah, exactly. It's
No. What I'm saying is, my kid decided that he wanted to try and go that route with me, and I was like, nope. I was like, because you know what? That's just not.
We're not materialistic.
No, we're not. I said, and if that's what you got to do to make friends, let me help you out. You're not at school to make friends, and that's one of those real hard ones for him to get. Like, yeah, we're not here to make friends, man. We're here to learn.
Let's kind of bounce back to what we covered today and get.
So
we got super sidetracked. As fun as
we
it was,
sure did, and that's okay.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, but so we were talking about how we left off closer to that. We were talking about how somewhere within society's genetics, we were predestined or pre-programmed or manifest destinied into having a prerequisite or a pre-wire for an economic system, where we're just pre-programmed to have to be that way. Now, when we live in a group of like 10 to 15 people, we can create a system where money doesn't need to be involved. We can have that, that type of we've proven that, people build communes everywhere and 15 to 20 people, and that works. But then as soon as that commune starts to become a city, it does start to go revert back. Hey, those are my 10 watermelon. I'll give you 1 for 2 of your corn. Hey, that goat looks good. I'll give you a couple stacks of grain for your goat. Eventually we revert our brains back into it. It's just something, and then we need to bring in the legal system, and then we'll need to bring in.
And then you need a leader, because now
Yep.
you need somebody to pull out a string so that the strings make sense, so that there's not, not necessarily rioting, but there's, an unease.
Pure chaos.
And absolutely, and it's just. I mean, again, my question is just why? Where does that come from? And that's
it's so crazy.
It's the pre-programming. It's the just think about our peer group when we were in our mid-teens. I mean, there was I can point out a couple of unspoken leaders of my groups of friends that nobody was been like, hey, you're the one that we're following, but it was like, hey, you're the one that we're following. Like, your word holds a lot more strength and volume than the next guy. And it's, it's there's something behind that. It's not just.
No, that's true. No, that's very true. We had a group hierarchy within our group, and we didn't. As me, I never questioned anything. I just showed up and said hi. I was just that guy. I was just like, hey, I'm just gonna. Hey, Oz made it. That's it.
For my like strong circle at that time, you were definitely just kind of like that shadow that bounced in and out. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And which, I mean, for your circular groups, I'm sure it felt much different. But
no, because the group that I had, like, what had been my circle out of high school into adulthood, like. When I no longer wanted to be the participating member, the whole group, that whole circle of people just turned to shit people. And it was like, oh, wow, I was the moral compass of this group. I was like, damn, I didn't want to be that guy. I was like, wow, because fucking a couple months after not hanging out with one dude, he's like hitting me up, hey, you know where to find, a whole jar? And I'm like, no. I'm like, oh, it's like, dude, no, I don't even do that. Like, why would I know where to find that? And he's like, yeah, you got tons of friends. I was like, yeah, I got tons of friends. But it doesn't
unfortunately, back in those days, I'd have been the guy where like, hey, what are you trying to spend? I'll make some profit off of that.
But I just, for the guy that it was, I didn't want to do that, because I'd already stopped being his friend. Yep. So I didn't want to do any type of anything around him or be near him or contribute to whatever he had going on. Because it like sounded like he started going to like every other rave he could find and shit like that. And I was just like, oh, okay. I was like, so you're going that route. And then the other guy, he became like some weirdo that takes pictures of people when they walk into stores. Yeah. Whenever I walked into over what is that card shop over off of Hiawatha,
well,
Dreamers.
It would have been what was it? What was it called? Something dungeon or not dungeon?
No, not off Cedar. Oh, not off Cedar. It was the one where the old Blockbuster was on Hiawatha.
Dreamers Vault.
Dreamers Vault.
Oh, okay.
So whenever I walk in there, there's somebody in there, doesn't even work there, and he would pull his phone out and take pictures of me.
Yeah, that's weird.
And I was like, it was really weird. And I was like, why are you taking these pictures? Don't be weird,
We're pushing almost 3 hours though. As much as
yes, we are
blowing up about this.
Yeah.
All right. Well, everybody have a great night. Thanks for stopping in. Thanks for saying hello, and thanks for being on the Late Night Load.
Let's go.
And we will be back on Tuesday night for another round of fun in the sun.
Welcome to the Late Night Load. Late Night Load.